Chapter 2109. Tantai's explosive temper. The four cultivators on the beast's back looked furious and glared at Tiantai's people with murder in their eyes. Their chi began to vibrate, especially Yikei's. Many people couldn't handle his chi, so they moved further away. Even some young people of the Jing clan couldn't stand near him. How strong! The people from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry are furious now, chatted the crowd. These battles were going to be deadly. Ho Ching Lin is those people's fellow disciple. He won the first battle, but the others aren't as strong as him. They won't be able to defeat the extremely strong cultivators of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. The crowd nodded to one another. 5 battles had to take place. Tiantai's strongest cultivator had won the first battle. So many people thought the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry would win the remaining battles. Second battle, I'll go, said Jing Shou indifferently on Tiantai's side. No rush, said Ho Ching Lin calmly. Jing Shou was strong, he could win, and Lin Feng was going to win too. Tiantai's people didn't even wonder when they'd send Lin Feng. He was definitely going to win, so they didn't rush. Even though Tiantai's people had won only one battle so far, they considered they had already won 2. Just like the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry considered they had already won 1 battle. Thanks to Yi Quebec, Tiantai's people were wondering who they could send for a third victory. Jing Shou could probably win one. So Ho Ching Lin didn't want him to rush. Mu Bei, they'll definitely try to kill you. When they release Qi, you leave and surrender. No need to fight to death, said Ho Ching Lin to Mu Bei telepathically. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry would naturally win the second battle. All right. Mu Bei nodded and jumped forwards, landing immediately on the battle stage. Die! Shouted the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's cultivator when he landed on the battle stage, attacking instantly. At that moment, his chi turned into a beam of light and shot towards Mu Bei. People around the battle stage were shaking. Mu Bei waved his hands, and stone plates descended from the sky and bombarded the chi. However, his expression slightly changed, and he withdrew quickly. You think you can escape? The strong cultivator of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry chased him closely. However, many words appeared in the air and exploded one after another, slowing him down. By the time they were done, Mu Bei had already jumped off the battle stage and said, I give up. Arg! That person shouted explosively. His chi turned into a dragon and charged Mu Bei. Ho Ching Lin smiled icily, releasing sword chi which snuffed out the dragon quickly. You don't even dare fight, coward, said that person, glancing at Mu Bei icily. He returned to the beast's back. The crowd sighed. As they had thought, Mu Chen's disciples couldn't compete with these people. 3 days before, they had made the blind sword cultivator fight, as well as a few other extremely strong cultivators. Otherwise, they would have had a chance to fight against these people. They're smart at least. They are trying to avoid losses, Su Mu said calmly from the middle of the Yu clan. The one who had just fought was also a genius from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Among those 5 people apart from Yi Kei, he was the next strongest of the group. Third battle, it's your turn, said Ho Ching Lin, not letting anyone distract him. A strong cultivator jumped forwards. He looked like a sharp weapon, his chi sharp. He resembled Wang Jian, whom Lin Feng had killed in the past. He probably practiced weapon cultivation. Jing Shou, this battle is yours, Ho Ching Lin said to Jing Shou. Jing Shou nodded. Back then, he had joined Champion University before Lin Feng and the others, and had already ended up second on the higher ranking list. Only Ji Wuya was above him. After that, Lin Feng and the others had displayed incredible talent, and Jing Shou had decided to help Lin Feng manage a secret force of Tiantai. At the same time, he had also obtained the Celestial Evolution Holy Scriptures, so he wasn't any weaker than Ho Ching Lin and the others, and he progressed as quickly as they had. Being friends with many geniuses was a good environment to progress quickly as well. Geniuses could help one another. If one of them didn't progress quickly enough, the others could help them out. When Jing Shou jumped onto the battle stage, the crowd couldn't see his hands because they were in his sleeves. The members of Tiantai knew why. He had the hands of an assassin, because back in the day, he was the first assassin from their homeworld. The strong cultivator of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry moved, and deployment lights filled the battle stage like a spider's web, turning into a pattern. At the same time, his body was surrounded by a sharp weapon chi. It was like he could destroy the sky. His chi seemed endless, and shot towards Jingshou. What a strong cultivator! The 5 members of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry are terrifying. None of them is weak. They're terrifyingly strong. The crowd chatted when they sensed that chi. I wonder whether this guy is as strong as Ho Ching Lin, or whether he will surrender and escape, mused some wags. Jingshou started moving. His body turned into an illusion, and his silhouette became blurry. He was moving swiftly, but it seemed difficult to catch him. What a mysterious agility technique. It's an invisible and intangible illusion. Even the terrifying weapon strength can't reach him. That guy wants to fight, it seems. He's really strong. The watchers finally realized. His hands were still in their sleeves. Die! Shouted the strong cultivator of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry loudly. He hopped around, his weapons emitting furious humming noises. Energies pulsed, driving thousands of long spears to impale everything. One mistake, and those energies would pierce him through. At that moment, Jingshou finally moved his hands. Illusions appeared, all silhouettes of Jingshou. Were those clones? Cut! Spat the strong cultivator of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry icily. A hand streaked across the sky, and a gigantic blade chopped through a few silhouettes. However, there were still a great many of them. They didn't seem to be corporeal, and continued closing in on him. Ice-cold lights suddenly appeared next to the ministry cultivator. One of Jingshou's silhouettes turned into a real body of Jingshou. He suddenly raised his left hand, and a gloomy dark light appeared. It was a dagger thrusting towards the man's head. The ministry cultivator was angered, his blood boiling. More weapons appeared, trying to hack apart that silhouette. However, danger came from the other side. Another illusion turned into a real body. The dark dagger was thrusting at him again. How dangerous! How can he hide with his arms? Wondered the audience. Which one was Jingshou? His attacks weren't very aggressive. It was like the illusions could vanish anytime. At that moment, blood splashed as one of the ministry cultivator's arms was cut, and he was driven backwards. The silhouettes followed. How savage! He looks like a beast. The crowd frowned. The cultivators on the back of the beast were shocked and looked unsightly. Rumbling sounds spread in the air. Ye Kei jumped off the creature and shot towards the battle stage. Move away! Shouted Ye Kei icily, explosions lashing in front of him. The battle stage started cracking. His friend was already behind him. Jingshou's silhouettes all shattered and he was injured, driven away as blood splashed. Tiantai's people were shocked. How ridiculous! The Jing clan invited such people to come and fight? We lost this battle, said Ye Kei icily. Then he added, sounding indifferent. No matter what, there are 2 more battles, the last 2 ones come together. What an asshole! Tiantai couldn't handle it anymore. He was losing it, he shouted explosively. He lost and you dare get involved. The celestial remarkable deployment ministry is a bunch of morons. How ridiculous! Sumu frowned. He turned to Tiantai and said, Watch your words. You 2 are stupid assholes as well. We're fighting for your clan. The Yu clan, and you're hiding and putting your tongue in the enemy's asshole. You're ridiculous, said Tiantai mockingly. Yulin moved towards him and said icily, You want to die? I want to die, shouted Tiantai explosively. He jumped towards Yin Li and released chi to the skies. He was furious and threw himself at Yulin. At that moment, Yulin pulled a long face, as did the other members of the Yu clan. When they sensed his Dao power and strength, they shivered. He was this strong? There were 2 loud crashes of brutal impacts, and Yulin was smashed far away as blood sprayed out. He awkwardly came back on his feet and stared at Tiantai. His face turned deathly pale. You're a damn piece of shit. I'll crush you, asshole. We'll see if you continue acting arrogantly in front of me every day like you've been doing, shouted Tiantai. He was furious now and kept swearing at the other man. Yulin felt extremely humiliated. Chapter 21:10. A silhouette stepping onto the battle stage. You're a damn piece of shit. I'll crush you, asshole. We'll see if you continue acting arrogantly in front of me every day like you've been doing." His voice resonated everywhere in the surroundings. The crowd was astonished and shaking, especially the members of the Yu clan. Their hearts were pounding violently. They were all staring at Tantai. At that moment, Tantai was furious and his strength kept exploding around him. A lion appeared around his fist. The first genius of the Yu clan, who also practiced cultivation in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, had been smashed away and was bleeding. The worst thing was that the Yu clan had never taken Tantai seriously before. Su Mu and Yu Lin had made fun of him numerous times. The Yu clan's members' hearts kept pounding. Su Mu and Yu Lin felt humiliated. They had humiliated Tantai a few times, and he had put down Yu Lin in one punch. Just before, Yu Lin had said he wanted to kill Tantai. Yu Xian's eyes were wide. She had thought that Tantai was strong, but she had never thought he could be that strong. One punch and he had crushed Yu Lin. Yu Xian thought of Yu Kuan, Yu Yi, and the others. They had never thought that Lin Feng's friend could be so strong, that such an amazingly strong cultivator could have been staying in their clan. They had just been cold to him. Yu Xian was astonished. At that moment, Yu Lin released a terrifying chi towards Tantai. A little dog needs a good lesson to submit. Tantai was aggressive. The clash of their power erupted in the air. He jumped forwards as lofty as a tower. The crowd had the impression they were looking at a lion king, wild and mighty. He shouted furiously but nobody heard him. His shout just resonated in Yu Lin's skull. It almost made his soul and body explode. The strength of a lion oppressed him. Yu Lin already had the impression he was going to be crushed even though Tantai was still running towards him. Yu Lin was the strongest emperor of the Yu clan. He was really terrifyingly strong. But when facing someone who had such a strength as explosive as Tantai, he felt weak. Yu Lin was smashed away again, the sounds of bones shattering accompanying him. He had the sensation his arms had been crushed. His right arm was hanging loose. His face was white as a sheet. That time, Tantai didn't say anything, he just acted and proved he was strong. Yu Lin was a proud man. Since he also practiced cultivation in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, he was considered a strong cultivator in the Yu clan. Amazingly, someone could oppress and humiliate him like this. Phew! The members of the Yu clan were astonished. The first genius of the Yu clan was being crushed by Tantai. Tantai was a guest of the Yu clan. They had all thought he wasn't strong. And he was Lin Feng's fellow disciple. Wait, there's something wrong. At that moment, Yu Kuan, Yu Yi and the other members of the Yu clan realized something. They slowly turned around and looked at another young man. Lin Feng had brought Tantai to the Yu clan. Tantai kept listening to Lin Feng's orders. Tantai was extremely strong. So what about Lin Feng? When they realized that, the members of the Yu clan were astonished, especially Yu Yi who had met Lin Feng first. Her beautiful eyes glittered. Lin Feng, the Yu clan had ignored Lin Feng, but how strong was he? If Lin Feng was as strong as Tantai, then he could already be considered a genius. Tantai was furious, he kept swearing furiously. A bunch of morons. Stupid Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. You lost so you lost, why did that shameless bastard have to come? A bunch of shit. Yu Lin, Su Mu, and the others, you are a bunch of shit. Then, Tantai looked at Ye and said icily, "You guys lost the third battle, you want to fight the fourth battle?" Ye frowned. Even though Tantai was strong and had defeated Yu Lin, he wasn't strong enough to fight against Yi Quebec. The crowd was astonished. So initially the Yu clan also had some members of Tiantai, Mu Chen's disciples? The Yu clan understood something. Tantai and Lin Feng were also Mu Chen's disciples. They had invited Ho Qing Lin and the others to come to the Yu clan, but they had ignored Lin Feng and Tantai, so they hadn't come. Jing Xiaoyu wasn't too surprised. She looked at Tantai and Lin Feng. Lin Feng had talked to her before. After what had happened, she had guessed that Lin Feng was also one of Mu Chen's disciples. She was relieved. Those people were all geniuses. Even if he died, at least he had left a great legacy behind. His disciples were all so outstanding, they could make the whole town tremble. I told you the last two battles, two at the same time. You can come if you want. I will show you the power of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. said Yi Ke as his cold chi filled the air. If he didn't get involved and Tiantai sent someone like Jing Shou again, a fifth battle would be useless. Therefore, he wanted to change the rules and fight against two cultivators at the same time. The rules could be adapted to different people sometimes. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry could choose the rules here, not Qingshan City. This battle isn't important to us, said Ho Qinglin at that moment. When the crowd heard him, they looked over. Ho Qinglin wanted to give up? This battle should have ended 3 days ago. We gave the Jing clan an opportunity to release our teacher. Initially, I wanted to exchange a deployment mine for my teacher. But the Jing clan doesn't care about rules. I was wrong. I think the Jing clan lost today, and they proved it, said Ho Qinglin calmly. He continued slowly. Today, we could have distinctly differentiated the winners and the losers. But the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry are like the Jing clan, a bunch of despicable and shameless people who never admit their defeats. You're proud and arrogant. You don't care about rules. You think you're just too amazing. I'd like to ask you, if you lost, would you do like the Jing clan? You wouldn't have handed over the deployment mine, right? When the crowd heard Ho Qinglin, they had the same thought. What if Yi Ke had lost? Would the Jing clan have handed over the deployment mine? Nobody could be sure. Since the Jing clan had gone against their word already, and invited some geniuses from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. If they lost, maybe they would find another excuse. Would the Yu clan force the Jing clan to give them their deployment mine? But could Yi Ke lose? Nobody thought so. Yi Ke certainly didn't think so. The members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry didn't think so. The Yu clan and the Jing clan both didn't think so. Yi Ke was an emperor who had no enemy at the same level. Even if you won some battles, you are not eligible to stand before brother Yi Ke, sneered a young man standing behind Yi Ke on the beast. Ridiculous. You are stupid. You can't defeat Yi Quebec. That's the most ridiculous thing I've heard this year, said another one slowly. Yi Ke was an emperor who had no enemy at the same level. Before the battle, you thought nobody was going to lose these battles. And when you did lose a few ones, you violated the rules, said Wuxia calmly. We humiliated you. And now nobody dares admit they've lost. Ridiculous, said someone else. The members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry and Tiantai were verbally jabbing one another. The clans just watched. A strong wind started blowing. The atmosphere became oppressive. Just reply, will you fight or not? Said Yi Ke calmly. Of course we'll fight. 1-on-1, replied Ho Qinglin. Tiantai's people looked at him nervously. Why was he so self-confident? Tiantai headed towards the battle stage. The crowd was stupefied. Tiantai. However, Tiantai stopped. If he didn't fight, who would? At that moment, the one they had ignored slowly walked out of the group of people from the Yu clan and headed towards Tiantai's people. Yi frowned and stared at that silhouette. She was shocked. The Yu clan's people were stunned as they watched him. Yi was staring at him. Tiantai's people watched him too. He was walking slowly. Everybody was staring at him. As he walked ahead slowly, that person everybody had ignored. It's him. Jing Xiaoyu was stupefied. Yi Ke's people were also staring at him. Lin Feng. Yu Xian's heartbeat accelerated. Lin Feng walked up onto the battle stage. Tiantai's people watched him. Yu Xian remembered what Tiantai had told her. You will understand what kind of person he is. Yi looked at Lin Feng. Yu Lin and Su Mu just stared. That calm and composed young man. It was the first time that they were going to see him fight. For some reason, he made their hearts beat faster. Finally, Lin Feng stood on the battle stage, facing Yi Quebec. However, Lin Feng didn't even look at Yi Ke. He looked at the people who were behind Yi Ke and said calmly, you will see that the joke isn't very funny. Chapter 21:11. Is that joke funny? The cultivator who was facing Yi Ke wasn't tall. He didn't release terrifying waves of energies. He looked quite calm and poised. Behind him, Tiantai's people looked totally confident as well. They didn't say anything. It was as if everything was as it should be. Is he the strongest cultivator of Tiantai? Thought Yi. Her lips moved, but she remained speechless. She just looked calmly at that young man. He had never shown them how strong he was. He had always remained calm, even when the Yu clan despised him, because he didn't actually care. His main target was the Jing clan, and more precisely Mu Chen. When Yu Kuan saw that, he understood something. When he saw how Tiantai's people reacted, he understood immediately that Lin Feng was one of Tiantai's strongest cultivators. However, could he compete with Ye Kai? Yu Lin frowned. He looked like a sly and vicious snake. Tiantai had humiliated him. His cheeks still burned as if he had been slapped in the face. From now on, people in Qingshan City would make fun of him. But Tiantai was stronger than him, it was a fact. The members of the Jing clan all watched Lin Feng. The members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry were also staring at Lin Feng. He looked very sure of himself. Maybe he was like Ye Kai and thought he couldn't lose? To the cultivators of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, he was just ridiculous. How could he possibly compete with Ye Kai? Ye Kai looked imposing and awe-inspiring. He looked at Lin Feng aloofly and arrogantly. He smiled disdainfully and said, "At the same cultivation level, very few people dare face me and look that self-confident. When they do, I usually crush their self-confidence." Lin Feng just looked at Ye Kai calmly. He said, "Just like my second fellow disciple said, we don't care about winning or losing. However, you want to prove how strong you are. What if you lose?" When Ye Kai heard Lin Feng, he was stunned. Then he smiled mockingly and said, "You're still so self-confident." He jumped forwards and explosion sounded. Lin Feng had the sensation his muscles were going to explode. Smashing Dao. Lin Feng was startled. Ye Kai moved forwards and released his strength at the same time. It was getting more and more explosive. Ye Kai's chi was increasing rapidly. Lin Feng's soul also started shaking. "Consciousness smashing!" shouted Ye Kai icily. He released an endless amount of smashing Dao and oppressed Lin Feng's soul. Lin Feng could feel that his soul was meant to explode. However, he remained calm and steady. It was very difficult to crush Lin Feng's soul. At that moment, his chi increased and sword intent began to vibrate furiously. The sword energies converged on him. He raised his hand and absorbed them, and then used those sword energies to destroy the smashing Dao strength. A light flashed. With Lin Feng's sword attack, it felt like time and space had stopped. Sword lights moved towards Ye Quebec. Ye Kai released explosive intent. His chi kept pulsing and increasing. Smashing weapon. Ye Kai raised his finger, and his intent fused together with his Dao power. Two light beams appeared, and the air seemed to shatter before them. Everything turned to dust. "How strong?" someone blurted out. The atmosphere had become quite oppressive, and they all felt under pressure. Lin Feng's sword lights were halted. However, Ye Kai's intent and the lights which emerged from his fingers also stopped. Both cultivators were extremely strong. Ye Kai was strong. Lin Feng was strong. That calm guy who had spent some days in the Yu clan was extremely strong. His sword attacks could easily kill cultivators at the top of the Huangqi layer. And it was just the beginning. It was as if millions of swords had been humming. Sword holy spirits appeared around Lin Feng. Lin Feng moved forwards and his swords cut everything before him. People had the impression they were looking at a mirage. Ye Kai's chi was still increasing, and he was also moving forwards. The ground kept shaking. He attacked the sword energies in front of him, as if he could destroy anything on his path. The two cultivators were getting closer and closer to one another. Lin Feng's sword energies were moving faster and faster. Swords descended from the sky, shining and cutting through everything. Ye Kai was also in a rush. He kept punching out hard enough to make the heaven and earth tremble. The dazzling sword energies couldn't reach him. This cultivator from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, who had no enemy at the same level, was really strong. Without a doubt. "If you can only do that, then you're far from being able to compete with me," declared Ye Kai calmly. He was getting closer to Lin Feng and releasing smashing Dao intent. He moved and deadly lights moved with him. Deployment energy filled the air. A terrifying strength fused together with his attack as his energies surrounded Lin Feng. Lin Feng had the impression he could die anytime if he was careless. He's a cultivator who has no enemy at the same level. People who will participate to the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds are really strong, thought Lin Feng. He raised his fist and punched out. With his other hand, he released ancient imprints. Words appeared in the sky. The words of his incantation appeared in the sky and floated around. They surrounded Lin Feng and resonated along with the earth and sky. Millions of sword threads condensed around Lin Feng, and his desolate cosmic energies condensed too. Lin Feng transformed into a sword king. His cosmic energies were extremely powerful. His aura wanted his opponent to submit before the will of a sword god. What a terrifying chi. And this is the 9-syllable incantation. The crowd frowned. Ye Ke sensed that Lin Feng's chi was powerful, but he just smiled icily and sneered. You know some good spells, but that's still not enough. Then, Ye Ke did some hand seals. His intent continued rising to the skies. Destruction of the earth and sky. The 10,000 things of creation can be destroyed. Weapons and consciousness cannot resist. Everything must be smashed, shouted Ye Ke loudly. He condensed the strength of the 10,000 things of creation. It looked similar to some attacks Lin Feng knew, as he could also condense the strength of the 10,000 things of creation. Smashing Tao and a terrifying chi made the whole crowd shiver, and their hearts started pounding. These two cultivators were terrifyingly strong. They could easily destroy some common great emperors. Ye Ke moved again. Deployment lights condensed around him and turned into smashing strength. His strength kept increasing. Ye Ke is terrifying. His attacks are terrifying, but so are his deployment spells. You're not the only one who knows deployment spells, said Lin Feng calmly. He stretched his hands out and moved them a few times. Celestial stages appeared and turned into flights of stairs. Lin Feng's celestial stage deployment spell condensed. It looked quite imposing. Great celestial smashing hand die, shouted Ye Ke explosively. Strength surged out and destroyed everything in its path. At the same time, Lin Feng also condensed the strength of the 10,000 things of creation and the earth and sky. It turned into a sky-destroying sword. His 9-syllable incantation also became more powerful. A gigantic sword streaked across the sky and moved across the celestial stage deployment spell. His strength resonated at the same pace as the earth and sky. Around Lin Feng, millions of sword shadows appeared. People's hearts were pounding furiously, staring at the oncoming collision. Brilliant lights appeared around the two fighters. Only one of them could win. The lights faded away, and the winner appeared. Lin Feng was standing in the middle of the destructive chi, unharmed. Ye Ke was smashed off the battle stage, on his knees, and kept coughing up blood. He raised his head and stared at Lin Feng, unable to believe what had just happened. He couldn't accept his defeat. Deployment spells. Your deployment spells are extremely powerful, muttered Ye Quebec. If Lin Feng hadn't used deployment spells, he wouldn't have won. However, Lin Feng's deployment spells were terrifyingly powerful, and now Ye Ke had suffered a crushing defeat. The deployment spells of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry are just SOZO, Lin Feng said calmly. The air was eerily silent. The members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, the Jing clan, and the Yu clan all remained silent. Ye Ke had lost. Ye Ke had unexpectedly lost. Ye Ke was an emperor who had no enemy at the same level, and he had lost. Lin Feng walked up to Ye Ke and looked down at him. The silhouettes of the members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry flickered, charging towards Lin Feng. He glanced at them with his pitch-black pupils. Cursing and death strength emerged from his eyes and intercepted them. At the same time, he punched out in their direction. The geniuses of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry couldn't compete with him. Did you think that joke was funny? Said Lin Feng to those people indifferently. He sounded like a demon. Nobody said anything. Chapter 21:12. Cruel punch. This unknown, proud, and arrogant young man was standing on the battle stage. He had attacked Ye Ke and made him bleed. Everybody remained silent, listening to their hearts beat. They were astonished. How strong! Ye Ke, a genius from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, hadn't been able to withstand a punch from this guy. Was that joke funny? Nobody laughed. Ye Ke was still coughing up blood. His injury was serious. Phew, how incredible! He clearly made that talisman himself, thought Yu Kuan, taking a deep breath. He was staring at Lin Feng. He had ignored such a strong cultivator, instead waiting for his teacher. He didn't know that cultivator was such a beast. Their best cultivator of the Huangqi layer, Yu Lin, couldn't compete with Yi Quebec. If Yu Lin and Lin Feng had fought, Lin Feng could have killed him easily. Yu Lin and Su Mu's faces had turned deathly pale. They realized they were nothing in comparison to Lin Feng. What do you want to do? Yi Kei's face was red and twitching. He was staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't look at him though, merely replied calmly, "You lost, don't you feel ridiculous? Do you think that joke was funny?" Yi Kei coughed uncontrollably again. He looked like he was in agony. He had never thought he'd lose like that. Lin Feng then turned to the members of the Jing clan and said, "Mu Chen's disciple Lin Feng." They had already guessed that, but when they heard it they were still stunned. He wanted to dazzle for Mu Chen, to avenge his teacher. Lin Feng's goal wasn't just to be acknowledged as a strong cultivator. He wanted the Jing clan to release Mu Chen. At that moment, Jing Xiaoyu's eyes were red. Mu Chen's disciple Lin Feng. It was a calm announcement, but it made everybody's heart pound. Just like the previous time when Mu Chen's disciples had all said, "Mu Chen is my teacher." The Jing clan was now under great pressure. "He's a member of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry," said a strong cultivator of the Jing clan. He was staring at Lin Feng with murder in his eyes. "You're still trying to play games." Lin Feng was furious. The members of the Jing clan had invited cultivators from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, which meant that they had contacted some strong cultivators of the ministry. Otherwise people like Yi Kei and the others would have never shown up. If Lin Feng killed any of them, maybe the important people of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry wouldn't let him off. But since Lin Feng was backed up by 3 clans, would the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry say anything? Would the Jing clan keep their deployment mine? The Jing clan was thinking that they were going to keep their deployment mine, and that they were backed up. If Lin Feng killed those people, Jing Yan's teacher would have a reason to kill him. He couldn't do much to them. He was just an outstanding young man. He couldn't kill Yi Quebec. As long as Yi Kei didn't die, the Jing clan didn't mind. Even Jing Yan's teacher wouldn't say anything. Therefore, the strong cultivators of the Jing clan protected Yi Quebec. They didn't dare let Lin Feng off, because they were worried he could kill Yi Kei. The geniuses of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry are pieces of trash. And the members of the Jing clan don't want to bear the consequences for their actions. Death intent emerged from Lin Feng's eyes. He raised his hands and suddenly death intent exploded out from them. Lin Feng instantly killed that ministry cultivator, his soul dispersed. The Jing clan wanted to play games? Then Lin Feng had to kill. When the crowd saw that cultivator of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry die, they were astonished. It was the second cultivator of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry to die. The Jing clan wasn't going to bear the responsibilities for their actions? When the members of the Jing clan heard Lin Feng, they were even more furious. Someone started advancing on him, and great imperial energies surged out towards him. His hand streaked across the sky, making a beam of light appear. However, Lin Feng waved his hand and disappeared. He reappeared above that cultivator. A dazzling column of light descended from the sky and moved towards that man. It was like time had stopped. That cultivator turned his head around and released all the qi he could in desperation. However, dozens of swords appeared and sliced him apart. Lin Feng landed back on the ground and glanced around. He said icily, "The Jing clan will pay the price for their actions." A silhouette jumped forwards, the earth and sky trembled. The powerful great imperial strength oppressed everything and shot towards Lin Feng. That kind of strength could easily destroy an emperor. "Is that enough? The Jing clan is truly shameless," said a strong cultivator of the Feng clan icily at that moment. He slowly stood up. "You lost several times and you keep being arrogant. Hand over your deployment mine now," said the strong cultivators of the One clan as well, releasing pulsing waves of qi. The strong cultivator, who was oppressing Lin Feng, was a celestial emperor. Initially, this battle was between the 4 clans of Qingshan City. The Jing clan would have lost the first time, but they had asked for 3 more days, and then had invited people from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Even with the desperate reinforcements, they had lost. But the Jing clan didn't want to admit they had lost. You people from Tiantai killed people from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. You think you'll get away with it? Sneered a strong cultivator of the Jing clan icily. The Celestial Emperor moved again. Lin Feng had the sensation he was stuck in a terrifying hurricane and going to collapse. He couldn't resist a Celestial Emperor. You're distorting the truth deliberately, said the strong cultivators of the Feng clan and the Wen clan. Only the Yu clan remained silent. They had some people who practiced cultivation in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. After all, they knew that the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry wouldn't forgive them if they got involved, so they had to shut up. It was better not to get involved and not to invite trouble. Even though they admired Lin Feng for his talent, they couldn't defend the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. The biggest clans of Qingshan City didn't dare offend them. Therefore, the members of the Yu clan remained silent, and that was the best they could do. Lin Feng had a sneering smile on his face. He had hoped to solve the situation using the simplest solution. After all, even though Tiantai's disciples were extremely talented, they needed time to become extremely strong, which is why they had decided to help the three clans. However, the Jing clan kept plotting against them, and it wasn't easy to solve the situation that way. Lin Feng slowly turned around and left the battle stage. At the same time, a dark shadow came out of the crowd, looking quite bestial. You think you can leave like that? Said the strong cultivator of the Jing clan. A strong wind started blowing. A gigantic hand swept out towards Lin Feng. However, at that moment, the dark silhouette moved like the wind across the battle stage. The dark silhouette grabbed Lin Feng and rose up into the air, at the same time releasing a punch which made the air tremble. The Celestial Emperor sensed the newcomer's strength. However, that person just had a powerful strength, but hadn't released chi, so the Celestial Emperor didn't fear him. He stretched out his hand. Explosions began to shake the atmosphere. A terrifying strength pounded out in the direction of the dark shadow. He could probably destroy the interloper easily. The terrifying strength smashed into the silhouette, and nothing happened. The newcomer continued moving towards the Jin Celestial Emperor, a mysterious strength emerging from his body as he punched out in the Jin man's direction. Just a simple punch. The punch destroyed the Jin Celestial Emperor's attack, stunning him. His hand turned into claws, and he waved them several times, using spells against the interloper. However, nothing happened. It was like that dark silhouette couldn't sense pain. He punched out again, and everything dimmed around him. How is that possible? The Celestial Emperor's face turned deathly pale. His spells were extremely powerful. He could bring his hand down and kill endless amounts of people. But this person's physical strength was too terrifying. Even if they had been a top-level Celestial Emperor, he should have sensed something, or at least injured the other. Even Saint Emperors would have sensed something. However, that dark shadow gave him nothing. The Celestial Emperor retreated, but it was too late. The punch reached his throat. There was a rumbling explosion as a huge hole appeared in his body. The dark silhouette continued moving towards him. He desperately threw everything he could at the dark silhouette, but his target didn't even react. He just grabbed the Celestial Emperor's body and shook him, blood splashing as he ripped the Celestial Emperor's arms off. He didn't stop, moving faster than most people could see. He grabbed the Celestial Emperor by the waist and drove him into the ground before punching him. Terrifying sounds of impact jolted people's hearts. The Celestial Emperor was being ripped apart alive. Blood kept spraying everywhere. He was slowly turning into a bunch of crushed bones and flesh. Chapter 21:13. Rescue Cruel, Explosive, Emotionless, Cold. The crowd was astonished and staring at the scene on the battle stage. Their faces kept twitching. It was yet another time they had been astonished today. Who is that? Everyone was staring at that cruelly brutal and violent person. They sensed no chi emerging from his body, but his strength was astonishing. He had ripped the Celestial Emperor's body apart with his bare hands. The Celestial Emperor had attacked him, but nothing had worked. Everybody was wondering what that person's cultivation level was. He didn't seem to have a cultivation level, he was just a body. However, even Qin Shan was astonished when he saw this. The Doomsday Auction House had many incredibly strong cultivators, but that body was useless to them. They knew it could be a saint's body, but even knowing that, they decided to sell it. It was perfect for Lin Feng. He had obtained it and could use and control it. He had studied hard to control it properly. Lin Feng knew that even if he could not use the saint's spells, at least he could use his physical strength. A saint emperor couldn't destroy that body, only saints could. Physical strength was essential. That's why it was part of the tests on the Holy Way stage. The members of the Jing clan all looked astonished. Even though they were one of the 4 most powerful clans of deployment spellcasters in Qingshan City, celestial emperors were considered as extremely strong cultivators in their clan. Losing a celestial emperor was a true tragedy for them. What was that person's cultivation level? At that moment, the body raised his head and suddenly moved at the speed of light towards Yi Quebec back, shouted the strong cultivators of the Jing clan extremely loudly. A strong cultivator of the Jing clan grabbed Yi Ke and withdrew as quickly as he could. At the same time, a few people advanced, and gigantic walls appeared to block the man. There was an explosion as the man destroyed the wall, and didn't stop. He punching out with both hands. The air thundered. 2 great emperors were struck and blew apart. The empty man continued moving incredibly fast. He looked like a god, his body indestructible. The crowd felt pressured, as if mountains were falling onto them. No cultivator of the Jing clan can stop him? Including celestial emperors? Who would dare try? Who is so insolent? Someone proclaimed at that moment. An overwhelming oppressive energy filled the air as another strong cultivator appeared. Master! The members of the Jing clan were delighted. The strong cultivator descended from the sky, condensing strength and attacking that empty man. The empty man was finally shaken and driven backwards. Finally, someone managed to make him move. The strong cultivators of the Jing clan were still in shock and staring at the empty man. However, when the man raised his head, he was safe and sound, totally uninjured. And there was still no qi around him. What the hell is that thing? The elder of the Jing clan was astonished. The empty man had no qi, and the elder's attacks were useless against him. The elder of the Jing clan condensed strength, stretched out his hands, and the atmosphere completely changed as a globe of energy appeared. He bombarded the empty man, metallic sounds spreading and piercing through people's eardrums. However, the crowd saw that the empty man didn't fear that attack. He also punched out in the elder's direction. Lin Feng wanted to try using the saint's body. Even Qin Shan was astonished when he saw this. That body was really impressive. The terrifying attack of the elder drove the empty man into the ground, a crater appearing around him. The crowd drew a deep breath, staring at the 2 fighters. After a short time, the body came out of the crater, still moving like the wind. The crowd couldn't believe it. What was that? Or who was that? An immortal body. The Saint Emperor's attacks drove him into the ground, but didn't destroy him. The crowd was staring at him. The Saint Emperor frowned and murmured, "Who are you?" His godly awareness reached out for the empty man. The empty man immediately punched out. The air distorted, and the godly awareness lights broke apart. "Old buddy, what's going on?" asked someone in the distance as more chi pulsed out. An old woman arrived at full speed. "That guy is so strange. I can't destroy him. He doesn't die," said the Saint Emperor icily. The old woman who had arrived looked at the saint's body. She focused on him and started attacking. There was a rumble as the empty man crashed into the ground again. However, after a short time, he simply came out of the crater again. "So strange. Is it a puppet?" wondered the old woman. "How could a puppet be so strong? I could destroy a puppet in 2 strikes at most," said the old man indifferently. The old woman nodded. She looked at the empty man. She had doubts. After a short time, she gazed into the distance and looked at the members of Tiantai and Lin Feng. "Old man, the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry lost?" "I think so," the old man nodded. The 2 old people frowned and stared at Lin Feng icily. "The Jing clan wants to continue playing?" Lin Feng asked those 2 people calmly. "You're quite arrogant, little boy," said the old woman icily. "You dare despise old people? He's talented, so being arrogant is normal," said the elder. "But that kind of people should die." The 2 old people were chatting, and the crowd sighed. The Jing clan didn't intend to give up their deployment mine. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had gotten involved. So the Feng clan and the Wen clan didn't dare steal the Jing clan's deployment mine either. You're more and more shameless as you get old. You lost, you're so angry that you vent out your anger on young people? Said someone icily in the distance. The Saint Emperors of the Wen clan and the Feng clan arrived and landed next to Lin Feng and the others. Ho Qing Lin, Tian Qi, and the others had already told the Wen clan and the Feng clan to get ready just in case. Tiantai's disciples were extremely strong, so the two clans had decided to help a little too. What? You want to take the Jing clan's deployment mine? Demanded the two Saint Emperors of the Jing clan. Of course. You wanted to steal ours too, retorted the Saint Emperor of the Feng clan icily. Mind your own business, said the elder of the Jing clan icily. The Jing clan violates rules, the Yu clan doesn't care, said the members of the Feng clan and the Wen clan, looking at the members of the Yu clan. The members of the Yu clan frowned. It wasn't as easy. At the same time as those people were talking, someone wearing a black robe arrived at the Black Tower. That person looked graceful, dainty and delicate. She had a beautiful face, but she looked quite angry. Who? Two silhouettes at the top of the Black Tower jumped out. But the woman suddenly moved. A second later, she grabbed those two people's throats, and their faces turned deathly pale in fear. Master, said the two guards, begging for their lives. Open the Black Tower, said Tang Yu icily. Those two people grimaced. More people arrived. Among them was a celestial emperor. The Jing clan kept their prisoners in that tower, so the guards had to be strong. Nobody could release them easily. Tang Yu suddenly threw those people away and released her qi. 3,000 shadows appeared and moved in all directions while releasing strength. In only a short time, the celestial emperor attacked by Tang Yu was injured. Tang Yu had his life in her hands. He had to open the deployment spell of the Black Tower. Release everyone who's inside, said Tang Yu glancing at those people. They all frowned at the 3,000 silhouettes around them. Their faces went deathly pale. They didn't dare go against her orders. They could only release the prisoners. Haha, who came to save me? Said someone happily at that moment. Many people came out of the Black Tower. In the tower, the Jing clan kept people who they couldn't just kill. Mu Chun was injured. When he came out and saw Tang Yu's beautiful face, he was stunned. Naturally, he recognized her. Chapter 21:14. Oppressing Tang Yu was delighted to see Mu Chun. She knew that Lin Feng cared about Mu Chun a lot, and Mu Chun had been gravely tortured in the Black Tower. She was furious at his condition. She looked at the people who came out of the Black Tower. Thank you very much for saving us, master, said those people. Many of them were extremely strong, but they couldn't break the Jing clan's deployment spells. When they came out and sensed Tang Yu's qi, they were very grateful. Today, the two ancestors of the Jing clan are out. If you want to get your revenge, you have to move fast, said Tang Yu icily. People's eyes twinkled. Of course they wanted their revenge. Die. Destroy the Jing clan. The prisoners released qi. They knew they had to act fast. They didn't waste time talking and entered the Jing clan's territory. Tang Yu's silhouette flickered, moving to grab Mu Chun. Teacher, what is the state of your injuries? Tang Yu asked Mu Chun. She looked worried. I'm not too badly injured. However, I am astonished by how strong you are. And you still call me teacher? I remember when you became Lin Feng's watcher. Back then you didn't even call me teacher, replied Mu Chun, smiling gently. He would have never thought such a thing would happen. He was stunned. It was just too unbelievable. Back in the days, Tang Yu had been a watcher. She was a half-disciple to Mu Chun. But now she had become way too strong. It's different today, teacher, said Tang Yu smiling as she grasped Mu Chun's arm. Mu Chun was stunned and said, Why, are you and Lin Feng that little boy? Yes, said Tang Yu smiling shyly. She said, Teacher, I became so strong because an extremely strong cultivator sacrificed his life for me. I didn't become strong relying solely on myself. It's impossible to progress so fast. I came to save you because Lin Feng asked me to. Lin Feng is here too? Mu Chun frowned. Yes, we're all here. Many of Tiantai's disciples are here. They are preventing the Jing clan's strong cultivators from coming here. They even managed to lure the Saint Emperors of the Jing clan to them. When those two arrived, the others informed me I could act and break the Black Tower. But the members of the Jing clan are now getting attacked. They will quickly notice this. Tang Yu smiled significantly. Mu Chen remained silent and overwhelmed for a long time. He finally smiled and said, I'm proud of my disciples. You're also like my disciple. Just like Tang Yu said, when the Jing clan's Black Tower was destroyed, some people of the Jing clan quickly learned about it. The two Saint Emperors pulled long faces when the news was sent to them. I wouldn't have thought you'd resort to sly methods and attack our Jing clan by surprise, said the elder, staring at Lin Feng with murder in his eyes. You're so shameless, I admire you. If the Jing clan hadn't been sly and shameless, I wouldn't have needed to do that, retorted Lin Feng icily. Lin Feng had used the saint's body, and the Saint Emperors of the One clan, and the Feng clan had arrived as well. The two Saint Emperors of the Jing clan had to retreat and bring their people back with them. Otherwise, these insane young people would kill them all. I'm off. You stay here, said the old woman icily. Someone had just informed her that the Jing clan was under attack, that their prisoners wanted to get their revenge. She had to return. The strong cultivators of the Jing clan knew that there were some terrifying cultivators in the Black Tower who had been imprisoned many years before. The members of the Feng clan and the One clan were startled. They wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng would be so smart. He had decided to take drastic measures to deal with the emergency and had so many trump cards. When the crowd saw how the two Saint Emperors of the Jing clan reacted, the crowd realized how resourceful Tiantai's people really were. They knew Lin Feng was extremely talented. These young people were all geniuses. You will pay the price for your actions, said the elder of the Jing clan icily. He couldn't attack him there though, it was too risky. Pay the price. Lin Feng smiled in a strange way. It seems that you still don't understand what will happen. The elder of the Jing clan frowned. Could Lin Feng do anything else to them? Masters, you want the deployment mines? Asked Lin Feng. Of course, said the two masters. The Jing clan wanted to steal theirs. Why wouldn't they take the Jing clan's deployment mine then? However, they were still a bit worried. Unless they became one clan, could they resist the Jing clan? If the Yu clan didn't get involved, the Jing clan wouldn't let them off. Yu clan, do you want it? Asked Lin Feng the members of the Yu clan directly. The members of the Yu clan remained silent for a few seconds, and someone finally said, The Yu clan is not getting involved. Alright then, don't get involved. You won't get your share of the Jing clan's deployment mine, said Lin Feng calmly. Brothers of Tiantai, protect me and summon our teacher. What? The crowd was stupefied. Lin Feng wanted to summon his teacher back? Did have an incredibly strong teacher? All right, said Ho Qing Lin and the others. They understood what Lin Feng meant. Lights twinkled around Lin Feng as he disappeared. Is that how he summons his teacher? The crowd was stupefied. The elder of the Jing clan frowned too. What was Lin Feng doing? Everybody looked around calmly. The crowd didn't realize how quickly Lin Feng had become the center of attention. An eerie silence came over everything. Then they heard a sound, like a great bell had been rung, which made their hearts pound. It sounded again, and a terrifying chi emerged and filled the air. It comes from under the ground. The crowd was astonished and looked at the ground. Something was moving down there, an earthquake. Everybody started shaking along with the ground. He's purposely making a mystery of a simple thing, said the Saint Emperor of the Jing clan icily. He moved and released a terrifying power. Millions of marks and fissures appeared on the ground. However, at that moment, the earth cracked and gave way as two hands slowly appeared under the Saint Emperor's feet. The hearts of the crowd pounded even faster. Such gigantic hands dash. The ground cracked fully open, and a man slowly came out of the ground. He was tall and sturdy, a true giant. The Saint Emperor of the Jing clan was shocked, looking like an insect in front of him. The giant could bury him underfoot. His chi wasn't terrifying, but the Saint Emperor of the Jing clan had never sensed this saint's strength. Saint, this was the power of a saint. The giant opened his eyes. They were dazzling as he stared at the elder of the Jing clan. You're the one who bullies my disciple? said the voice, every word like thunder. The Saint Emperor stepped back, his face deathly pale as he stared at the giant. Impossible, you're not a saint. No saint has come here. You're just a thread of a consciousness, exclaimed the elder of the Jing clan, icily releasing a terrifying strength. He was getting ready to attack. Indeed, I gave 2 puppets to my disciple. The body he used just before is one, and this one is one too. I also transmitted a thread of soul strength to him. He can summon me anytime. You want to try and see how strong I am? Said the giant, calmly slowly walking forwards. The emperor couldn't help but retreat. However, at that moment, the empty man also arrived, and the Saint Emperor pulled a long face. If the old woman had been there, she could have helped him, but now he was alone. Lin Feng! Someone shouted at the same time in the distance. Tang Yu and Mu Chen arrived, and saw Tiantai's disciples and the giant. They understood what was going on. Tiantai's disciples were excited when they saw Mu Chen. Brother! Ho Qing Lin looked extremely happy when he saw Mu Chen. He almost had tears in his eyes. Mu Chen kept nodding at him. All right, little boy, you're a big boy now. Brother, Emperor, you found us. When he sensed you were injured, he didn't want us to come, so we came without telling him, said Ho Qing Lin. Mu Chen was gratified at the news. His old friend was safe, and his disciples were strong. They even had an imposing appearance. He hadn't wasted his time raising them. They were all outstanding. They were talented, but also loving and caring. When the elder of the Jing clan sensed Tang Yuyu's qi, his paling face twisted yet further. If he had only been facing the giant, he would have tried to see how strong he really was. However, there were so many strong cultivators, he couldn't take the risk. The giant didn't attack either. At that moment, Lin Feng was controlling 2 bodies. He had wasted too much energy with Qin Shan's body the previous time. He couldn't do it again. He just wanted to scare the Saint Emperor to death. Lin Feng still hoped he would be able to find a godly medicine to help Qin Shan recover someday. That way, he would have someone to protect him all the time. He wouldn't need to pretend to scare his opponents. But now he had no choice, and it was still enough to scare the Jing clan. At the very least, the Saint Emperor of the Jing clan was scared. Chapter 21:15. Jing clan's weakening. Mu Chen looked at the giant, and that terrifying qi which made him shiver. How strong! He was truly astonished. Who had brought such a strong cultivator come to confront the Jing clan? Mu Chen didn't think the other clans had helped him. They were all strangers to him. Mu Chen! Jing Xiaoyu called out softly when she saw Mu Chen. Her heart twitched. She started crying and said, I'm sorry. Mu Chen looked at her and smiled. Xiaoyu, it has nothing to do with you. I didn't know the Jing clan had imprisoned you in the Black Tower, said Jing Xiaoyu. She was extremely sad. Her clan had deceived her. Yes, I know, Mu Chen nodded, smiling softly. At that moment, the giant took another step towards the elder of the Jing clan. I want some people. If anyone dares stop me, I'll kill them. The empty man also walked forwards. Tang Yu joined them. 3 terrifying cultivators. The elder of the Jing clan felt the pressure, his face stiffened. He said icily, Whom do you want? If you ask anything again, it won't be as simple as wanting a few people. You deceived my disciple. We'll definitely settle accounts, said the giant, releasing an overwhelming oppressive energy. His energies were as dauntless as the sky. The other saint and Tang Yu walked towards Yi Quebec. You can't touch him, shouted the Jing clan's strong cultivator extremely loudly. Don't worry, we won't kill him. We'll just teach the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry a good lesson, replied the giant icily. The empty man and Tang Yu pushed the people who were protecting Yi Ke away, then grabbed Yi Quebec. It wasn't over with just that. Tang Yu took Yi Ke back, and the other saint walked over to the 2 remaining cultivators of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. The beast they were riding roared defiantly, trying to protect them. However, the empty man punched it, and simply blew it apart with a single blow. Nobody dared stop him anymore. He grabbed the 2 other strong cultivators of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, 1 in each hand. They couldn't even struggle with him. What's this supposed to mean? Asked the elder of the Jing clan, his face truly unsightly now. The Jing clan had invited 5 geniuses of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry to come and fight. 2 had been killed, 3 had been captured. If Jing Yan's teacher came to know that, the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry would be furious at the Jing clan. Especially since among those 5 people was Yi Kei. The giant glanced at the elder of the Jing clan icily, but remained silent. Tang Yu spoke to Jing Xiaoyu directly. Master, leave the Jing clan and follow our teacher. Jing Xiaoyu was stupefied. This was, without a doubt, the best time to leave the Jing clan. Nobody would dare stop her. Master, said Ho Qing Lin, and the others greeted Jing Xiaoyu. Jing Xiaoyu shivered. She saw all those people smiling and finally smiled back. The release of her cares beautiful to behold. She looked at Mu Chun and said, "My man, your disciples are amazing." As she walked over to him, the members of the Jing clan were furious. This battle had turned into a tragedy. They had lost faith in people, and it wasn't even over. The giant turned around. The other saint was looking at the strong cultivators of the Jing clan, and he said, "Some things must be sorted. Today, the Jing clan lost. From today on, the Jing clan's deployment mine is no longer theirs. As the Yu clan has refused their share of the profits, the Jing clan's deployment mine is now the Wen and the Feng clans. They each get half of it. If the Jing clan attacks them in the future, I'll kill Yi Kei and the 2 others. This thing with the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry has nothing to do with the Feng clan and the Wen clan. If the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry wants to get their revenge and attacks them, same thing, we'll kill Yi Kei and the 2 others." The members of the Jing clan were furious. They had lost face people and now their deployment mine. Alright, it's over for today. I'm sure the Jing clan will keep their promises now. It's enough for today, said the giant dismissively. His massive form receded into the ground. After a short time, Tiantai's people surrounded Lin Feng, who had reappeared. Brother. Lin Feng raised his head and looked at Mu Chun, smiling broadly. Little boy, smiled Mu Chun. He was speechless. He didn't need to talk much anyway. It's over now. Let's go, said Lin Feng. They all headed out. After a short time, the members of the Wen clan and the Feng clan also left. Only the members of the Jing clan were left, as well as some members of the Yu clan. Yu Xian watched those people heading off. She had seen Lin Feng and his friend every day on her clan's territory, yet her clan wasn't having a good time. Lin Feng and Tantai were very honest. They were similar to her. Yu Xian, take care, said a voice in the distance. It was Tantai. He turned around, waved, and smiled at Yu Xian. Yu Xian's heart twitched. She suddenly felt so sad. Little girl, sometimes in life you have to take initiative, said a voice to Yu Xian telepathically. Yu Xian turned around and met her father's eyes. She was startled, but replied the same way. Thank you very much, father. I will definitely come back and see you. Yu Xian said, I'm going for a walk, and began to leave. Yu Lin and the others frowned when they saw that. Yu Lin shouted, Stop, where are you going? I'm going for a walk to relax, replied Yu Xian, glancing carelessly back at Yu Lin. Come back, said Yu Lin, frowning coldly. He knew that Yu Xian wanted to go with Lin Feng and Tantai. I can go wherever I want without your permission, shot back Yu Xian. Yu Lin looked at her icily and said, If you dare leave, we'll expel you from the Yu clan. That damn piece of shit dares act arrogantly again. You want me to teach you a lesson again? Shouted Tantai furiously in the distance when he heard Yu Lin. Yu Lin's face stiffened up and he shut up. Big boy, I want to come with you. Will you take me or not? Yu Xian asked Tantai. All right, come with us, answered Tantai with a broad grin. He didn't mind at all. All right, Yu Xian nodded. She turned around and looked at Yu Lin and the other members of the Yu clan. She said, I'm leaving the Yu clan. If I die, it has nothing to do with the Yu clan. I've made up my mind. See you. Then she left with Tantai, Lin Feng and the others. The members of the Yu clan were astonished. Lin Feng and the others gradually disappeared in the distance. 3 days prior, the Jing clan had thought they'd steal 3 deployment mines, and now their plans were completely ruined. The Jing clan had invited cultivators of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry to protect their deployment mine, and they had failed. The 5 geniuses of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had either been killed or captured. Now the prisoners of the Black Tower had been released, and had slaughtered many of the members of the Jing clan as they took their revenge. Many of the prisoners were also from powerful clans, so their clans would want to get their revenge too. The crowd all understood something. Because of a few young people, the first clan of Qingshan City was going to fall. The next day, the Feng clan and the Wen clan made a formal alliance and invaded the Jing clan's deployment mine. The Jing clan had no choice but to accept. They couldn't let Ye die. 3 days later, many people arrived at Qingshan City. They wanted to attack the Jing clan, and some of them had good relations with the Feng clan and the Wen clan. They were getting ready to teach the Jing clan a good lesson. A Saint Emperor of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry landed on the Jing clan's territory. When he learned the result of the battle, he slapped Jing Yan so violently he flew far away. Jing Yan's cultivation was crippled, and was now a good-for-nothing. He couldn't practice cultivation anymore. In the Saint Emperor's eyes, 100 Jing Yans were worthless in comparison to a Yi Quebec Ye was supposed to participate in the meeting of the Continent of the 9 Clouds. But he had been captured. He wasn't dead, but he was useless. That Saint Emperor decided not to take a part of the deployment mine in Qingshan City. He was in a rush. He wanted to find Ye Ke. Ye Ke was one of the geniuses of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. He had disappeared, and it was a very big problem. They didn't care about Qingshan City. He arrived at the territory of the Feng and Wen clans, wanting to find Lin Feng and the others, but they had already disappeared from Qingshan City. They had Ye Ke with them, so they obviously couldn't stay in Qingshan City. Besides, the Wen clan and the Feng clan had nothing to do with that matter. The members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had willingly come to Qingshan City to fight. Jing Yan's teacher also had to bear a part of the responsibility, so he was even more furious. He was also furious that Ye Ke had lost a battle, and most amazingly, that a saint had appeared in such a trivial town as Qingshan City. The Jing clan had fallen. The Wen clan and the Feng clan had joined hands and were starting to rise. They became extremely close. They knew that it was the only way for them to strive forwards. Chapter 21:16. Going to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Lin Feng and the others had left the city almost immediately. Their only goal for going to Qingshan City was to save Mu Chen. Now they had saved Mu Chen and captured some people. They couldn't stay there. Lin Feng was convinced that many people weren't going to let the Jing clan off easily. Even if nobody destroyed them completely, they were going to become nobodies. That was the price for having imprisoned Mu Chen. In a mountainous area, a terrifying demon cloud rose up into the air. Culpa's strength pierced through the sky and bombarded someone on the mountainside. Everybody was staring at that silhouette. Lin Feng, that little boy, has he obtained something? Mu Chen's heart kept pounding. He had the sensation that Culpa's strength could kill him, but it didn't do anything to Lin Feng. He was just standing there proudly. Brother, no need to be surprised. Ho Qinglin smiled. Mu Chen nodded. I would have never thought that our people would become so incredible. And it's even more surprising that all the disciples went to study at Champion University and recreated Tiantai there. Of course, we want to make Tiantai even more powerful and stand at the top in the continent of the 9 clouds. Ho Qinglin with quiet determination. He continued softly. Teacher, Emperor Yu and you are the real leaders of Tiantai. You must recover and take the lead again. It will be a flourishing period for Tiantai. No, I can't, said Mu Chen smiling and shaking his head. I'm old now. You are all stronger and more talented than me. You have all surpassed me, and will become even stronger in the future. You can now take care of Tiantai. I will travel and enjoy my life with Xiaoyu. You and your wife can enjoy life even if you take care of Tiantai, said Tianqi smiled. Mu Chen clapped Tianqi's shoulders and said, little Qi, you're an adult now. Time passes too fast. Indeed. Lin Feng even has kids. Brother, when will you have a child? We'll have a new fellow disciple, said Wuxia. Everybody was chatting happily. Mu Chen was recovering slowly. His soul was injured, and he needed a good soul pellet to recover. The demon clouds dispersed. Lin Feng took a deep breath, as if he were absorbing the demon lights of the earth and sky. Then his silhouette flickered, and he landed next to the others. Brother, how do you feel? Mu Chen smiled. Awesome. My whole body is filled with strength, said Lin Feng. He stretched out his hands and his bones crackled. The strength radiating off him felt dangerous and explosive. Mu Chen calmly punched Lin Feng and hurt his own hand. He couldn't even make Lin Feng move. He smiled and said, with your physical strength, even a cultivator of the top of the Huang Qi layer can't pose a threat to you. Brother, people call Yi Ke an emperor who has no enemy at the same level. Actually, Lin Feng is a cultivator who has no enemy at the same level, a real one. And it'll become even more true when he reaches the very top of the Huang Qi layer. Tiantai grinned. He didn't know Mu Chen, but he knew he was one of Tiantai's founders, and so respected him. The continent of the 9 clouds is extremely vast. I don't know how big it is, and I don't know what it means to be a cultivator who has no enemy at the same level. Back then, Ji Chang thought he was one, and then Chu Chun Chiu started rising. Then I met Wang Jian and Zhuo Qing, and then I met Wu Ju, and the 13 young beast masters of the animal district. They're all stronger than the next one. Nobody has no enemy at the same cultivation level in the continent of the 9 clouds. The most important thing is to become stronger and stronger. As you break through, you have fewer and fewer enemies, said Lin Feng calmly. Even though talent and cultivation level were interconnected, the higher the cultivation level, the better. You're right, breathed Mu Chen. Lin Feng, without mentioning the continent of the 9 clouds, there are many geniuses in godly clouds already. Qingshan City is a small town, but there are many strong cultivators there already. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry has other people like Yi Quebec. Yes, the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry is powerful. I captured those 3 and interrogated them about the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. It's a mysterious place indeed. They practice cultivation and study deployment spells there. They also have many mysterious worlds. They're famous in godly clouds, so they must be extremely strong. Where are we going? Said Mu Chen. Godly Clouds capital city, Godly Clouds City, the place where the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds will take place, said Ho Qing Lin, his eyes twinkling. They had come to Godly Clouds, and they wanted to participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. It would be a magnificent sight. Even if they couldn't join, they could watch and learn. According to legends, there are 12 mysterious towns within Godly Clouds. They all have a celestial flight of stairs, which leads to the real city center of Godly Cloud City, and that place is supposed to be the real location of the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. Many strong cultivators are heading there. Climbing up the celestial flights of stairs won't be easy, Mu Chen informed. Yu Xian nodded and added, each of the 12 towns do lead to the place of the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. Strong cultivators will appear like a gathering storm. The shrines support the event, and they're the only ones who can open the passages, I believe. Godly Cloud City was a mysterious place even to people from Godly Clouds, especially the inner part of the city, where the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds was supposed to take place. There is still some time before the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. However, people are already excited about it. Many people are rushing to Godly Clouds from abroad. Yes, we still have time. We need to think, said Mu Chen with a smile. Tiantai's people couldn't go straight to Godly Cloud City. They could gather some experience first. You're right, brother. I think so too. Maybe that we'll have some opportunities on the way. We can travel and we'll see where we want to go, replied Ho Qing Lin with approval. He looked at Lin Feng. What do you think, Lin Feng? I want to go to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, said Lin Feng. Ho Qing Lin was startled. This guy wanted to go there? Lin Feng wanted to spend a few days turning Yi Ke and the others into puppets. With Yi Ke's talent, turning him into a demon puppet, and teaching him the Celestial Evolution Holy Scriptures would make him incredibly strong. It would be much better than using the Holy Jade Princess. He had also learned a few things about the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, So he had some plans. You have already planned something, it seems, said Ho Qinglin smiled. All right. We're so many people we can separate anyway. We'll meet and gather in Godly Cloud City again. That's exactly what I was thinking. We're so many people, traveling together is inconvenient. We can divide into 4 groups. Brother, you want to spend time recovering, or do you want to travel with the others? Asked Lin Feng to Mu Chen. We'll see. I can travel with Xiao Yu. We can travel and see the country. Mu Chen smiled broadly. No, you can't. I'll make the puppet protect you from a distance, said Lin Feng. Mu Chen and Jing Xiaoyu glanced at one another, smiled and nodded together. All right. We'll meet in Godly Cloud City, replied Mu Chen. Lin Feng was relieved. With a saint close by, nothing could happen. He didn't need to worry about his fellow disciples. They were wise and strong. They would also reach the top of the Huangqi layer at some point. In the end, they divided into 5 groups. Lin Feng stayed with Tang Yuyu. Mu Chen and Jing Xiaoyu stayed together. Ho Qinglin and Tianqi took some people with them. Jing Shou and Jian Meng departed with some others. Ruoxia, Tantai, and Yu Xian traveled with some others. After having spending some time together for a few days, they had divided once again. Lin Feng and Tang Yuyu traveled, looking confident and at ease. Once in a while, Lin Feng bathed in the demon pond, and his Devamar body grew stronger, his physical strength ever increasing. He didn't know how terrifying the cultivators were going to be at the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. In the Dark Night region, there were the 13 Beast Masters and Saint Tianhan. He knew how strong they were. There was also the first master of the Dark Night region. Saint Tianhan was a true saint. He was going to progress extremely quickly. Therefore, Lin Feng had to become as strong as he could as quickly as possible. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry would be a good place to become stronger. He would also learn about deployment spells there, possibly by studying the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. Lin Feng had studied small and great deployment spells, but the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry probably had many things to teach him. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry was situated in the middle of a mountain range. It was far from any city, in the middle of nowhere. Lin Feng walked around slowly and looked at the magnificent landscapes. He sighed. This place was amazing. It was exactly in the middle of 8 cities, which were still some distance away. The Celestial Deployment Plate is there. Lin Feng looked at a gigantic stone plate, which formed the entrance of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Lin Feng arrived in front of the Celestial Deployment Plate and put his hand on it. Lights surrounded his body, and Lin Feng was teleported away. Lin Feng smiled as he reappeared in a place with many marks on the ground. He put his hands on them. There was a rumble of power, and the deployment spell broke apart. The Celestial Deployment Plate opened, and Lin Feng crossed the door. Chapter 21:17. Beautiful women's bet. Lin Feng crossed the door and appeared in an empty space with intertwining marks. There was a deployment spell pattern in front of him. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry is an interesting place. If you want to enter, you first need to activate the Celestial Deployment Plate, and then you need to break the 999 deployment spells. It is the only way to become a real member of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, mused Lin Feng to himself. His prisoners had told him this. The Celestial Deployment Plate was to test deployment spellcasters' comprehension. If they didn't have at least a basic ability to analyze deployment spells, they couldn't enter. After the Celestial Deployment Plate, there were 999 deployment spells on doors, and all cultivators had to use a deployment spell to break them. It was difficult, but it was also a good test for people who didn't have an advanced knowledge of deployment spells, as they could at least practice on them. Those were the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's requirements. If a cultivator couldn't break the door, and if they failed to do it even after a long time, then it meant they were not skilled enough and could leave. Of course, many people who joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry were already strong deployment spellcasters. Many people didn't even need to make great efforts to break the door. Therefore, most people who joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry were extremely talented. There were deployment marks under Lin Feng's feet. After a short time, the deployment marks turned into an authentic door which he opened. Lin Feng crossed the second door. It was easy for him, and he progressed quickly. After an hour, he had crossed 600 deployment doors. He was extremely fast. He could destroy the spells in the blink of an eye. However, the doors finally became quite complex. There were millions of marks before him. Lin Feng had the feeling he was in a maze. Even if I need some time to cross the doors, someone ordinary wouldn't even have made it here. Lin Feng reassured himself. He continued onwards, and after 4 hours, he had crossed 800 doors. Inside the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, there was a gigantic peak, with 999 lights on it. More than 800 were twinkling right now, which meant someone had managed to break over 800 doors. The members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry could all see that mountain and those stars. Many people were staring at it. "It's been a long time since someone has passed the test of the doors," said someone at that moment. "I wonder whether anyone paid attention when the first light twinkled." "It's been 4 hours. I noticed it the lights 3 hours after he started," said some people in the ministry. "What? 4 hours to cross over 800 doors? Yao Qing Shan, are you sure you saw that right?" asked someone who had doubts. "Yes, 4 hours to cross over 800 doors. He could break the record. I'm sure the first light hadn't appeared 5 hours ago. When I saw the first light, there were only 9 lights or something. So initially I didn't really care," said someone else. Everybody was amazed. This cultivator was extremely strong. Those people couldn't be lying. It proved this guy was really strong. Crossing over 8 doors in 4 hours is incredible. He might finish the test in less than 10 hours. Only 500 people in the history of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry have managed to finish it in less than 10 hours. "Haha, a new monstrously strong cultivator will join us," said someone loudly. In the history of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, such things happened extremely rarely. "Yes, he must be extremely strong. Even now I couldn't finish it in less than 10 hours, admitted a strong cultivator. Many people nodded agreement with him. Sometimes, people who had just joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry could be stronger than them. 830 lights. Less than 10 hours, said someone. Everybody looked at the peak and frowned. "How fast?" "Interesting," said a strong cultivator landing at the top of the peak. Only one person could stand at the top of the peak. "It's Qianmo," he noticed. Someone reported surprised. "Gu Shanqiu, how long do you think he will need?" Qianmo asked someone who was also coming, more slowly than he had arrived. "Around 10 hours. He already knows deployment spells, that's why it's easy for him. But in the end it gets complicated. Maybe he will need more than 10 hours. Maybe 8 hours will be enough." Women's voices rose. 2 more people had arrived. Yu Qingsha and Shueluo. "That guy must be a terrifying deployment spellcaster. Many people are watching him already," murmured some of the watchers below. Those people were all strong cultivators of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. It took Ek 10 hours to finish the test. He's been the best performer in recent history. Before Ek, among the people who are still in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, only 2 managed to do it. If that guy wants to finish in less than 10 hours, it won't be easy for him, said Shueluo. "Nothing is impossible. He could be a new talented cultivator. We'll see." Yu Qingsha smiled. "I am convinced this guy will only need 8 hours to finish it." "Haha, the 2 beautiful women are starting to fight," said Qianmo, smiling happily. Shueluo and Yu Qingsha were both beautiful women, and they liked to argue. They were both extremely strong, both in terms of cultivation and deployment spells. True geniuses of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. "Mind your own business," said Yu Qingsha disdainfully. "Let's bet. What do you think? If you're right and he finishes within 8 hours, you win, otherwise I win," said Shueluo. "All right, but how can we know when he started?" replied Yu Qingsha. "Let's say he started 4 hours ago. If you lose, you kiss Qianmo," said Shueluo icily. Qianmo's eyes twinkled at those words. The others were furious. She knew that Qianmo was pursuing Yu Qingsha. but she didn't like him. Yu Qingsha's eyes glittered. She looked at the gigantic peak. If you lose, you kiss the one who comes out. No matter who he is. Yu Qingsha, it could be an old man, especially if he's super talented. People could join the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry at any age. Except and if he really manages to do it, then I'll help you and kill him. Qianemo said to Shueluo telepathically. Shueluo's eyes glittered, and she burst into laughter. Qianemo had a high position in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. If he killed a newcomer, nobody would say anything. He was too strong and too talented, but he was cruel too. No wonder Yu Qingsha hated him. I agree, said Shueluo. Just wait then. Everybody gazed into the distance. The bet the two beautiful women had made attracting more and more people. They were all staring at the gigantic peak. 8 hours was too complicated. Only 100 people had managed to do that in the whole history of the ministry. Lin Feng didn't know he had drawn so many people's attention, as he didn't know people could see when someone took the test. He just crossed doors one after another calmly. He wasn't even trying to go fast. What's going on? He's going so fast. The crowd murmured. 930 doors. Only 6 hours had passed and less than 70 doors were left. He was way too fast. 10 hours are way too much for him. Even 8 hours are too much, thought the crowd, looking at the two beautiful women. Qianemo was also staring at Yu Qingsha. He would be so happy to kiss her. More time passed. People surprisingly felt nervous. More and more lights were twinkling now. 980 doors. The crowd gulped. Less than 6.5 hours had passed. But the last doors were a bit more difficult. The two beautiful women were nervous and staring at the lights. We bet on a kiss. You better do your best, said Yu Qingsha indifferently. Shueluo looked furious. She didn't want him to succeed so quickly. When Lin Feng crossed the 990th door, people felt like their hearts were about to explode from excitement. This person was an extremely strong deployment spellcaster, maybe even a great scholar. Last 2 doors. Almost 8 hours. But if he hurries, it shouldn't be a problem. Soon, we'll know who will win the bet. 998, the last door. People's hearts were pounding. Last minutes, said Shueluo indifferently. Yu Qingsha nodded. No problem. Their hearts pounded faster and faster. Who was going to win? Who was this extraordinary person? It twinkled, proclaimed Shueluo. Qianemo was furious. Less than 8 hours. Yu Qingsha smiled indifferently and said, You lost. Chapter 21:18. Power. Shueluo knew she had lost, and looked furious. She looked at the gigantic peak as a door opened. Everybody was staring at the door. Who was going to join the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry? Who had passed the test with merit? Everybody wanted to see him. None of them could do what he had done. To the members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, their time was important, and 8 hours was just an unbelievable time. Finally, the door slowly opened itself, and someone appeared. He was wearing a white robe, and looked handsome and clean. Lin Feng didn't try to hide his face too much. Even though the battle in Qingshan City had drawn the attention of some people of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, even if he hadn't disguised himself too much, the members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry probably wouldn't recognize him. They couldn't have paid attention to someone else's disciple. However, when Lin Feng came out, he was stupefied to see that so many people were staring at him. He felt like an animal in a cage at the zoo. So many people dash? Lin Feng found he was annoyed. Why so many people? How handsome. You're lucky. Yu Qingsha looked at Shueluo and giggled. You're lucky, he's such a handsome boy, kissing him will be a pleasure. Ask him if he accepts first, said Shueluo icily. Yu Qingsha smiled and retorted. Don't go against your promise. Who said I promised? Replied Shueluo. Qianemo stepped forward, staring at Lin Feng and asked indifferently. Miss Shueluo wants to kiss you. Do you want to accept or not? When Lin Feng heard that, he was surprised. Had they bet on his result? What's going on? Replied Lin Feng with equal indifference. It only took you less than 8 hours to finish the 999 deployment doors test. In the history of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, Few people have managed to do that. Therefore, Xue Luo, and I bet on your result. Less than 8 hours, Xue Luo had to kiss you. More than 8 hours. I had to kiss someone I hate, said Yu Qingsha, smiling thinly. Lin Feng looked amused and said to Yu Qingsha, I see. So you weren't afraid of taking that risk? I won, right? Yu Qingsha smiled. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. Those people were a bit whimsical. I asked you something, Qian Mo said coldly to Lin Feng, releasing qi to surround him. Lin Feng frowned. These people had bet on him. And he was almost lucky. A beautiful girl had to kiss him. But the best play was to refuse. He walked forwards and didn't look at Qian Mo. He hadn't come to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry to do stupid things. However, now it was difficult to escape from the situation. Qian Mo looked at him and smiled icily. He moved and a deadly strength moved towards Lin Feng. So you had agreed secretly. Xue Luo, you can't even kiss someone, you're disappointing, said Yu Qingsha when she saw that. Lin Feng sensed a dark arm moving towards him. Explosive and ice-cold lights appeared in his eyes. He suddenly turned around and punched out explosively, qi turning into a vortex. Lin Feng's physical strength was terrifying. Even great emperors couldn't compete with him in terms of physical strength. His punches could kill great emperors. The terrifying punch moved towards Qian Mo's attack and collided with it. Crackling sounds spread in the air. Dark lights invaded Lin Feng's arm, but he waved his arm, and the corrosive strength instantly disappeared. Qian Mo grunted with pain. He retreated quickly, but his bones felt extremely sore. His arm was now hanging limply. What powerful strength, the crowd murmured when they saw that, staring at Lin Feng. This guy was an incredible deployment spellcaster, but he was also extremely strong and young. Even though Qian Mo isn't weak, that attack was terrifying. Surprisingly, that guy crushed his arm. How strong? What was that? Lin Feng said dismissively, as if he'd felt a raindrop. Everybody was stunned as he continued walking over to Xue Luo. Xue Luo frowned and stared at Lin Feng. He chose to do that, or you asked him? Lin Feng asked calmly. When Xue Luo heard that, she felt a sudden pressure. This young man was extremely strong. She had seen his punch. I asked him, what do you want to do about it? Xue Luo couldn't handle the pressure. She was facing this powerful man. She had to bear the responsibility. Lin Feng raised his hand. Xue Luo looked astonished and retreated quickly. However, Lin Feng followed her as fast as lightning. He tore apart the power in front of him. Xue Luo raised her arms to stop him. But the nature of the explosive clash of their auras showed her defense was being overwhelmed. Her arm was crushed. People's faces stiffened. This guy was crazy. He had just joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Was he going to destroy Qian Mo and Xue Luo? Nothing could stop Lin Feng's punches. He raised his other hand and slapped her face, without his full strength. And even then she was sent spinning away. Blood even spilled out of her mouth. Everybody remained silent. This guy was crazy. Xue Luo had been slapped by this guy. What a humiliation. Yu Qingsha was astonished too. She hadn't anticipated this guy would be so strong and aggressive. Lin Feng stared at her and said icily, you bet on me, you lost and tried to fight me? I would have never kissed you anyway. You're cheap and dirty. Lin Feng slowly turned around and walked towards Yu Qingsha, smiling at her. Yu Qingsha was surprised. Did he want to fight with her? The crowd was watching him closely. Lin Feng smiled thinly and said, since you bet with her and she lied to you, you can come along. He reached her and smiled. Kissing a beauty is a pleasure. Yu Qingsha was startled, but she smiled and said, since you don't want to kiss Xue Luo, you won't like my kiss either. Wrong, I like you, said Lin Feng, giving her a knowing smile. Yu Qingsha's heart started pounding. If she refused, would he punch and slap her too? Not only did that guy humiliate Xue Luo, but now he also wants to kiss Yu Qingsha. The crowd was speechless. Yu Qingsha looked at Lin Feng's smile and giggled. Since it's that way, I'll kiss you. Then, she walked forwards and put her lips on Lin Feng's. They kissed in a gentle and soft way. It even looked passionate. Many of the men watching were stunned, envious, and jealous. After kissing, Yu Qingsha turned around and left, smiling as she said, I'll remember that kiss. Lin Feng watched her go calmly. There were 81 buildings in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. It was extremely vast. Lin Feng walked away. That guy is strong, however, people won't let him off here. He humiliated Qian Emo and Xue Luo. Some people muttered. And Yu Qing, he forced her to kiss him. He offended many people already, he's audacious. Many people expressed their opinions about Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't care. He was there already, he couldn't help but sigh, wondering how many geniuses came from this place. Chapter 21:19. 10,000 Deployment Walls Pattern. Lin Feng's eyes glittered as he gazed into the distance. He thought to himself, the 10,000 Deployment Walls pattern is one of the treasures of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and there are only two ways to get in. One is to rely on one's own strength to enter the 81 ministry buildings under the jurisdiction of the 9 ministry sects and become a direct disciple. The second one is to survive a 10,000 killings great deployment spell, and then you can immediately enter it. Those were the rules of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. To see the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's treasure, there was no quick and easy solution. A cultivator had to be a strong deployment spell caster to gain the right. If they were strong enough, they could pass the 999 Doors challenge and join the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. But accessing the rest of the resources wasn't that easy. The 10,000 Deployment Walls pattern was one of the treasures of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. In order to access it, the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had to either acknowledge a disciple's strength, or the disciple had to risk their life. Yi Ke had told Lin Feng that the 10,000 killings great deployment spell contained 10,000 deployment spells. They were all deadly. No matter what the cultivator's cultivation level was, passing that test was extremely difficult, especially that the higher one's cultivation level was, the more difficult the 10,000 killings great deployment spell challenge was. In the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, people who managed to pass that challenge were extremely rare. Lin Feng arrived in a vast place. He slowly rose up into the air and punched the sky, hand imprints appearing. He kept rising higher in the air. Finally, the sky shook and golden lights filled the sky, as if a door had been opened. Inside the 81 ministry buildings, many people looked at the sky and frowned. Someone wants to take the 10,000 killings great deployment spell challenge. The 10,000 killings great deployment spell of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry is a fusion of 10,000 deadly deployment spells. It's been a long time since anyone has managed to pass the test. People rose up into the air and surrounded Lin Feng, staring at him. Yu Qing was there too, and when she saw him, she was stupefied. This guy wanted to sit the 10,000 killings great deployment spell challenge? No wonder his deployment spells were so powerful. What a terrifying guy. He had just joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and he already wanted to sit that test. Lin Feng entered the empty space and lights surrounded him. The golden lights turned into a cloud and condensed into a deadly strength. How formidable! Lin Feng followed the deadly golden path into the empty space and quickly disappeared. The 10,000 killings great deployment spell closed itself after he entered. After a short time, more silhouettes gathered. It's him. He just passed the 999 Doors test in less than 8 hours. He broke one of Qian Mo's arms, slapped Xue Luo's face, and now he wants to sit the 10,000 killings great deployment spell test. How strong! He even humiliated Xue Luo. Qian Mo and Xue Luo are members of the 9 main ministry buildings. They won't let him off. Thought many people. Qian Mo and Xue Luo were fellow disciples, members of one of the 9 main ministry buildings. There were many strong cultivators there, and the strongest ones were extremely strong. They would probably help Xue Luo and Qian Mo deal with Lin Feng. Many people didn't know what Lin Feng wanted to do. He was in the deployment lights and millions of lights were surrounding him. A terrifying deadly chi surrounded him. Deadly deployment spell. Lin Feng raised his head and saw millions of arrows move towards him. Those arrows could easily pose a threat to a high-level emperor. However, Lin Feng was quite calm as he walked forwards unhurriedly. The arrows crashed onto his body, but his physical body was too solid and resistant. Lin Feng continued walking forwards. After the arrows, a rain of fireballs started. They were scorching hot. Around Lin Feng's body, an armor made of demon and earth cosmic energies appeared. A terrifying strength moved towards him, golden deployment lights in the form of a sword. Lin Feng punched it and destroyed it. However, as he continued walking forwards, a dagger made of lights descended from the sky towards him. Lin Feng calmly punched it as well, and instantly destroyed it. Lin Feng was walking slowly. None of the attacks posed a threat to him. However, he was more and more intrigued as time passed. How enigmatic. Each time he took a step, a deadly attack was awaiting him. Those deadly deployment spells were all kinds of strange things. There was no pattern to them. All this was the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell. The strong cultivator, who had cast it, was probably a great deployment master. He could cast probably mighty deployment spells in the blink of an eye. Even though Lin Feng was particularly relaxed and didn't feel any pressure at all, it was precisely because his physical strength had reached the strength of the top of the Huangqi layer. Ordinary cultivators of the top of the Huangqi layer couldn't do anything against him. Otherwise, if an ordinary emperor had come in, they would have died almost instantly, especially to those attacks which blotted out the sky and covered the earth. It was basically impossible to dodge them. Of course, there was another possibility. If a cultivator's deployment spells were extremely powerful, they could use them to resist the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment spell. Lin Feng continued walking forwards, and noticed some impressive deployment marks shooting towards him. Deployment spells fell from the sky one after another. Lin Feng didn't stop at all though. Those deployment spells couldn't make Lin Feng stop for even a second. He was just a passenger there. At his back were 80 ancient swords. A terrifying sword intent filled the air around him. When Lin Feng had the impression an attack could threaten his physical body, he used them. If the members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had known that he was walking in such a calm way, they would have been astonished and speechless. In millions of years, only one person like him had appeared, precisely because of his physical strength. Most of the deployment spells couldn't affect him at all. He didn't even need to block them. Therefore, Lin Feng didn't waste his energy. People from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry thought that the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge was extremely difficult, but Lin Feng finished it easily. When he finished, he appeared in a mountain dwelling, the room calm and dark. There were 10 passages in there. 9 of them led to the 9 main ministry buildings. Lin Feng used the 10th one, the one leading to the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. A wall appeared in front of him, the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. That wall looked alive. It contained an endless amount of deployment spells. Each mark was mysterious and evolved differently. One of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's treasures, the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. An imprint appeared in Lin Feng's third eye. The word Earth appeared. 9 Supreme Ministries Earth Ministry imprint. Outsiders, even if they passed the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge, could only watch that wall. But only disciples of the 9 Supreme Ministries could use that imprint to enter the wall. Therefore, Lin Feng used that imprint to enter the wall, and let it surround him. It was an empty space inside the wall. In front of him, an old man was carving deployment marks. His deployment spell was changing. One of them turned into a firebird, moving as fast as lightning. The next one moved slower. A great rock appeared and also flew away, accompanied by whistling sounds. It looked neither real nor fake. How strong! His animal deployment spells are great. That old man is an incredible great scholar, thought Lin Feng. He sat down cross-legged there, and studied the old man's movements. He forgot about everything else in the world, solely focusing on the old man. As Lin Feng studied the old man's movements, he didn't forget to apply the Celestial Evolution Holy Scriptures to the deployment spells. He had to understand and adapt things to his own condition. He couldn't learn stupidly by heart without thinking about what he was doing, including in terms of deployment spells. The great deployment spells kept transforming. With the power of the mind, Lin Feng realized he understood some things he had never understood before. He now understood deployment spell strength in a different way. It was a new territory. Lin Feng spent 7 days there before leaving. He went to another empty space. There was a middle-aged man there carving deployment marks. His deployment marks were weapons, destructive and deadly. His hand looked like a sword, and he kept condensing deployment swords made of cosmic energies. At the same time, he created weapons using deployment spells. Lin Feng continued studying. All sorts of cosmic energies used to carve different deployment marks. Lin Feng spent some time there. Many people were talking about him in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Some people guessed he had died during the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge, because many people came to the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge place and didn't find Lin Feng. He still hadn't come out after so many days. So many people guessed he had died in there. Nobody could imagine that he had stolen Yi Kei's memories, had passed the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell Challenge, and was now studying deployment spells there. Chapter 2120. Trying deployment spells. The 10,000 deployment walls pattern had 10,000 deployment spells, all different from the 3,000 great deployment spells Lin Feng had obtained long ago. It was like another territory. Lin Feng focused on deployment spells during those days. Lin Feng was seated cross-legged. There was no strong cultivator in front of him. He was alone. He was studying the modified version of the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. The 10,000 deployment walls pattern has 10,000 deployment spells. There are all sorts of deployment spells. I've been here for more than 40 days. I can't study all of them. If I controlled the 10,000 deployment walls pattern, it would be much better, thought Lin Feng with a sigh. Unfortunately, the 10,000 deployment walls pattern was one of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's treasures, and with his current strength, he couldn't understand them. Lin Feng wanted to study more, but he needed to go to Godly Cloud City. Even though there was still time before the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, it was some distance away. He didn't know what would happen on the way either. He couldn't miss this chance. He preferred being early and having enough time to get prepared. Therefore, he stopped studying. He had already learned a great deal. He already understood 2 kinds of deployment spells. He hoped he could get them to fuse together to make his deployment spells even stronger. Lin Feng had spent many days in the 10,000 Killings Great Deployment Spell and hadn't come out yet. People from the 9 Supreme Ministries hadn't seen him. A potentially famous disciple of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had vanished without trace. Everybody thought it was a pity. Someone came out of the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. When he saw nobody was there, he left, merging with the wind. He opened the door and departed. In the central part of the 81 normal ministries, a silhouette fell from the sky. People frowned, especially when they saw the person zipping away. Who is that person? Someone turned around and saw Lin Feng leaving swiftly. Let's go and see, said someone chasing after him. Yi Kei was imprisoned in Lin Feng's small world. He had learned a lot from him, and could already travel freely in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. He moved at eye-blurring speed without stopping. After a short time, he arrived in a place with a mysterious deployment area. It was extremely vast with many deployment stones. It was a famous place for the ministries who practiced deployment spells there. There were over 100 deployment spell testing places there. Many people were trying different deployment spells. Many people from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry came there often to practice. The strongest deployment spell casters rarely came there, because the other disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry wouldn't have dared come if the strongest ones were there, since their deployment spells were too powerful. After Lin Feng arrived, many marks appeared under his feet. At the same time, he released a hurricane of cosmic energies. Lin Feng had an advantage over many people in terms of deployment spells, because he controlled many cosmic energies. In the blink of an eye, dozens of cosmic energies hummed about him and formed swiftly. Illusion intent filled the air. It was made of empty space strength which Lin Feng turned into golden illusions. They were dimly discernible, and yet dazzling at the same time. Many people noticed that. Golden cosmic energy which turns into illusion deployment spells? Those already present frowned. They were stupefied. Which supreme ministry was this guy from? In the illusion deployment spell, Lin Feng chopped down, and music spread in the air, turning into a sword halberd and disappearing into an empty space. Whistling wind. Lin Feng moved his hand again. The wind roared out with hollow thunder. There were many marks in the air, as the hurricane condensed. However, Lin Feng attacked the empty space, and the hurricane became invisible and intangible. Deployment spells can mean anything. I just understand the basics. So-called great deployment masters must be as strong as saints, thought Lin Feng. He wasn't proud that he had been in the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. He had just learned that he didn't know enough. He realized his deployment spell knowledge was extremely low. Lin Feng kept moving his hands. Deployment marks kept intertwining. On the deployment spell testing site, many people noticed him and heard the sounds emitted by his attacks. Some people frowned and looked at him sharply. "Who's that deployment spell caster?" asked someone looking at Lin Feng. "I don't know. Surprisingly, he's disturbing everyone." "Interesting. Let's go and see how people will deal with him," thought some people excitedly, and flew towards Lin Feng. "Be careful. That guy dares interrupt everyone. He must be extremely strong. He condenses cosmic energies to create his deployment spells. We can't see inside. He's a very skilled deployment spellcaster." "Yes, let's stay together and see," agreed 3 people, entering the deployment spell. "Are you here?" After entering the golden empty space, they couldn't see one another anymore. "How come you're so far away?" replied one of them at that moment. "Oh no," whispered the third one at that moment. Some powerful force filled the air, the sounds painfully piercing through their ears. They were having auditory hallucinations. A strong wind started blowing. That person pulled a long face. He waved his hands and his eyes lit up with light. He looked around at the empty space deployment marks. There were a great number of deployment marks. He condensed the strength of the earth and sky to react. If he could see the marks, he could destroy the deployment spell. However, when he saw the deployment marks, he had the sensation he was being paralyzed. What kind of deployment marks were those? They kept changing. He could only see them for a few seconds before they changed. What a powerful deadly wind strength! The man's face turned deathly pale. He was hurled away with rolling thunder as it struck him. The marks on the ground kept intertwining and turned into walls. "I lost." "Stop," said a voice in Lin Feng's mind. The 3 cultivators were expelled from the deployment spell and crashed onto the ground. Their clothes were ripped apart, their bodies riddled with bleeding wounds. "How do you feel?" The cultivators glanced at one another. They were all shocked. What a powerful deployment spell. How dangerous. In the celestial remarkable deployment ministry, only around 30 people can cast such formidable deployment spells. I think not more 20 actually. I didn't even understand those deployment marks. There were so many colors and patterns. Who's the deployment spellcaster? I don't know. I didn't see clearly. Many people started to make fun of them. They didn't believe them. They immediately entered the deployment spell and very quickly, they realized those 3 people were right. They were also hurled ignominiously out of the spell. Indeed, this guy was a very powerful deployment spellcaster. More and more people tried, and in the end they were all forced out. It drew many people's attention. Lin Feng was calmly studying deployment spells and modifying them according to his needs. Deployment spells represented extensive knowledge and profound scholarship. He just had to think of something, and he could make it. Nothing was impossible. Therefore, Lin Feng had completely changed. He didn't adhere strictly to formalities anymore. He made the deployment spells change constantly. He had the sensation that he was evolving on the path of deployment spells. After this, he intended to leave the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. He had studied the 10,000 deployment walls pattern, and it had been really helpful. 3 more days passed, and during those 3 days, nobody dared attack that deployment spell. Lin Feng kept on changing it. Qianemo and Shueluo are here too? Someone saw 2 people arrive, Qianemo and Shueluo from the Li ministry. They were both extremely strong. However, they didn't intervene. They just stayed in the distance and observed. It's Xiamao. Someone frowned when they saw that person. Xiamao had surprisingly come personally. His eyes looked strange and evil. Everybody knew how dangerous he was in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. He was one of the strongest disciples of the whole ministry. Just like Yi Kei, some people considered him an emperor who had no enemy at the same level. So many people are here. The people looked around and realized there were many strong cultivators from the 81 normal ministries, and even from the 9 supreme ministries, including Xiamao from the Li ministry. The news that an incredible deployment spellcaster had appeared had already spread through the whole ministry. Chapter 21-21. Nobody can break it. Who's the one trying deployment spells? Xiamao gazed into the distance with his strange and evil eyes. He looked indifferent, calm and aloof, yet dignified and majestic. I'm not sure, but his deployment spells are extremely powerful, replied someone. Xiamao frowned. Someone has been testing out deployment spells for a few days, and nobody knows who it is? What makes his deployment spells so powerful? Asked Xiamao. The deployment marks intertwine perfectly. Xiamao nodded and smiled at the crowd. People from all the ministries are here. Who wants to go and see who that guy is? Brother Xiamao, the Li ministry is the most powerful. You should go into the deployment spell and see, someone urged him. If I go into it and destroy it, you won't see what makes that deployment spell so powerful, replied Xiamao calmly. Everybody shivered. Many people had tried to go into that deployment spell, and they had all been thrown out of it. They hadn't even understood what was happening. It contained all sorts of energies. If the deployment spellcaster hadn't been merciful, they would have died. Therefore, people who weren't extremely strong didn't want to go into it. Weaker people didn't want to lose face, but they still wanted to see how the 9 supreme ministries would take care of the issue. The supreme ministries can send 2 people each. What do you think? Said Xiamao to some strong cultivators from supreme ministries calmly. The competition between the supreme ministries was ongoing as always. I don't mind, answered someone neutrally. I agree too, responded other members of the supreme ministries. Xiamao looked at Qianemo and said, Qianemo Shueluo, your deployment spells are extremely powerful. You can probably break it. Xiamao knew that Qianemo had been humiliated by someone who had crushed his arm. Everybody made fun of him in the supreme ministries. Now he was being given an opportunity to regain face. If he managed to break the deployment spell, people would stop making fun of him. Xiamao had been humiliated even more. She had been slapped in the face and driven away. Everybody knew what Xiamao meant. Yu Qingsha was in the same position. Even though she hadn't gone through something too bad, that guy had forced her to kiss him. It was nothing glorious. 8 people from 4 different ministries entered the deployment spell. Qianemo and Shueluo immediately attacked when they entered, deployment lights intertwining and surrounding them. Powerful cosmic energies condensed and absorbed everything around them. Qianemo and Shueluo were nervous, nearly paralyzed with sudden fear as their faces turned deathly pale. They sensed the danger coming from all around them, but they couldn't see anything, so they didn't know where to attack. Everybody, attack at the same time and mess up the deployment marks, shouted Qianemo extremely loudly. Terrifying sounds spread in the air and pierced through their eardrums painfully. The sounds were distorted and sharp. The sounds grew sharper and sharper. Qianemo had the impression he was going to die. He didn't feel safe at all. And the strength kept increasing. Drops of cold sweats fell onto the ground. The ground started shaking. Qianemo was overwhelmed by the fear. He couldn't stand it anymore and shouted furiously, I surrender, take me out of the deployment spell. Piss off, answered a voice icily. Qianemo sensed a strong wind brush against him. He furiously condensed strength to block it, but an explosive strength hurled him away. The terrifying deadly energies were getting closer and closer to him. Qianemo had the impression he was going to die. He ran away, but he couldn't see the outside world when he was in the illusion. It felt like the earth and sky were about to collapse on him. Piss off. More strength condensed as thunder rumbled. Two more people were hurled away. A hurricane surrounded them and smashed down. Qianemo crashed weakly to the ground. It's you. You just attacked me. Qianemo and Shueluo looked at each other stupefied. They were speechless. They looked back at the deployment spell. A short time after, Yu Qingsha and another man were hurled outside of the deployment spell as well. They also looked stupefied. What's going on? Xiamao asked Qianemo and Xiamao, frowning unhappily. This guy's deployment spell is too powerful, we can't break it, stated Qianemo ashamed. He couldn't break it, and he couldn't stay inside. He wasn't defiant at all. It's a great scholar, he's terrifyingly strong, Xiamao declared. People who had been in the deployment spell before and had failed just smiled icily. They knew how strong that deployment spell was. They hadn't managed to break it either. If Xiamao and his friends couldn't break it, nobody could. Could it be Ek? Maybe he's back, wondered Xiamao aloud. He had heard that Ek had been traveling. Maybe he had come back and was trying out deployment spells. Maybe he was deliberately mystifying? That deployment spell doesn't look like a deployment spell Ek could cast, disagreed Qianemo. Xiamao nodded. He walked forwards and entered the deployment spell. Many people were startled. Xiamao was a great scholar. He had an advanced understanding of deployment spells. People who weren't great scholars couldn't understand his deployment spells. Besides, he also had a special kind of strength. He was definitely able to destroy this deployment spell. After Xiamao entered the deployment spell, the same thing which had happened to Qianemo and Shueluo happened to him. His eyes turned black and white, and grew larger and larger. A vortex appeared before him. He could see through everything. Everything in front of him turned black and white. Empty deployment spell, interesting, said Xiamao passively. The qi was extremely powerful, but it was just an empty deployment spell. Qianemo had probably not even noticed that. He had just been terrified. Xiamao slowly walked forwards, looking relaxed. He didn't attack at all. After a short time he laughed to himself. The illusion deployment spell is the basic foundation, and inside there are many invisible and intangible deadly deployment spells. What a powerful deployment spell. Whistling sounds spread in the air. Xiamao jumped away as some strength moved towards him. He punched out in the direction of the invisible and intangible strength. Chaos, shouted Xiamao icily. The whole deployment spell was filled with a terrifying qi. Wind, fire, thunder and all kinds of strength moved towards Xiamao. He smiled coldly. His qi pulsed around him. He waved his hands. Deployment marks started intertwining and turned into an invisible and intangible curtain, which moved towards the incoming strength. He wanted to destroy the deployment spell using a deployment spell. There was an explosion at the collision. Xiamao sensed that a new kind of strength was condensing again. It was even more terrifying than the previous strength. The strength kept increasing in power. Xiamao looked surprised and frowned. However, the endless strength forced him to be more defensive. His attacks were very powerful, so he didn't fear the attacks from the deployment spell. But his defense wasn't as terrifying as Lin Feng's. He couldn't endure the attacks with his physical body. It would have been too risky. Outside, the crowd watching the deployment spell saw a gigantic dark dragon appear. A dragon of death. It could absorb any kind of strength. The death intent it contained shook them to their cores. The whole deployment spell turned black. They hadn't thought that the deployment spell would change this much because of Xiamao. The gigantic dragon spat out strength, and death qi filled the air. After a short time, the crowd saw a silhouette appear. He was hurled violently out of the deployment spell, his body all black. He looked dead. People's faces stiffened. They were staring at the deployment spell and gulped down. They only realized how terrifying the deployment spell was, and how it had changed after this. Phew. Xiamao took a deep breath. He slowly stood up and used life qi to recover. His face was still black, and one could see he was still scared, speechless. Xiamao almost got killed in the deployment spell. It's extremely powerful. Someone in the crowd whispered. Who are you? Please show yourself, said Xiamao. He couldn't think of anyone who could cast such terrifying deployment spells. Was it one of his fellow disciples of the Diqi layer? But his fellow disciples of the Diqi layer hadn't come to the testing area. Xiamao, In the distance, someone came up slowly. He was tall and composed. When he showed up, everybody was astonished. A great emperor of the Li ministry. Brother Z, replied Xiamao politely, nodding at the new arrival. It was a very strong cultivator of the Li ministry, a great emperor. It's been a long time since the 9 supreme ministries of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry have seen such a terrifying deployment spellcaster. Please show yourself, Your Excellency, said Great Emperor Z solemnly, looking at the deployment spell. Chapter 21-22. Great Emperor Z. When the crowd heard Great Emperor Z, they stared at the deployment spell. Xiamao had almost died in there. How powerful was this spell? Who had cast it? Everybody wanted to know. At that moment, the illusion slowly dispersed. Very quickly a silhouette appeared. It was Lin Feng. When Lin Feng appeared, many people frowned in astonishment. It's him. Surprisingly, that guy isn't dead. Qianemo and Xue Luo's faces paled. They had hoped brother Xiamao would be able to help them fight against Lin Feng. But later they had thought he had died in the 10,000 killings great deployment spell. So they had slowly started to forget about him. However, Lin Feng wasn't dead, he was standing in front of them. Not only hadn't he died, but his deployment spell had almost killed Xiamao. Qianemo and Xue Luo felt ashamed. They had bet on Lin Feng. In their eyes, Lin Feng was just a new member of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. They hadn't thought he'd be so strong. They could just look down upon him. Even Xiamao couldn't compete with him. Yu Qingsha was astonished too, and pulled a long face. This guy was so strong. His deployment spells were powerful. He hadn't just become a great scholar. He was an experienced great scholar. Who is he? Xiamao asked Qianemo coldly when he saw that so many people looked shocked. He's the one who passed the door's test in less than 8 hours. I thought he died in the 10,000 killings great deployment spell. Qianemo replied telepathically. His face stiffened. Xiamao frowned and stepped forwards. He said to Lin Feng icily, "You didn't die in the 10,000 killings great deployment spell?" "Why would have I died in the 10,000 killings great deployment spell?" replied Lin Feng. Great Emperor Z said indifferently, "Xiamao, this guy's deployment spells are formidable. You think the 10,000 killings great deployment spell could kill him? Be respectful." Xiamao was startled at the rebuke and looked ashamed. Indeed, with the power of his deployment spells, how could he have died in the 10,000 killings great deployment spell? But Xiamao just couldn't believe his eyes. "I went to the 10,000 deployment walls pattern a few times, but I didn't see you. Where were you? I am not a direct disciple of the Supreme Ministries, so I can't go into the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. Staying outside would have been useless. So I just stayed in the 10,000 killings great deployment spell and studied there. Is that surprising?" replied Lin Feng. He had already anticipated someone would ask him that question, so he had an answer ready. His answer was, after all, the truth. If someone couldn't enter the pattern, not bad. But with your talent, you should go into the 10,000 deployment walls pattern. If you wish, I can inform the teachers and they'll recruit you as a disciple. They'll give you a memory imprint, which will prove your social status, and you will be able to go to the 10,000 deployment walls pattern anytime. It will help you a lot. What do you think? Great Emperor Z smiled. Those crowd were astonished at the offer. Great Emperor Z was a genius and a great emperor of the Li ministry. When he saw geniuses, he hoped they could join the Li ministry. He wanted to help Lin Feng. He didn't feel jealous or envious at all. Xiamao's eyes glittered. Lin Feng hadn't been in the 10,000 deployment walls pattern? If he had, he would have been even more fearsome. If Lin Feng joined the Li ministry, it would have a negative impact on Xiamao's social position within the Li ministry. He had a different position from Great Emperor Z. He was still an emperor. He was the strongest and most talented emperor of the Li ministry, and always obtained the best resources. People admired him. If Lin Feng joined the Li ministry, that would change. But since Great Emperor Z was saying this, Xiamao couldn't intervene. "We'll see," replied Lin Feng calmly. Great Emperor Z was startled but smiled oddly. "Does that mean you refuse?" Lin Feng looked at the man. A great emperor, a genius, ambitious and proud, personally inviting him to join the Li ministry. But Lin Feng refused and didn't give him face. Even though Great Emperor Z didn't release any qi, the atmosphere became oppressive around him. Kind of, answered Lin Feng indifferently. The atmosphere grew particularly silent. This guy is talented, but he's also ambitious and proud. Great Emperor Z invited him personally, and he refused. He could have joined a supreme ministry without taking any test, and surprisingly he refused. No wonder Great Emperor Z is furious, thought the crowd. Great Emperor Z is a nice person and cares for the Li ministry. However, he's not nice to his enemies. Even the members of the other supreme ministries fear him. He hates evil people and evil things, murmured someone. Great Emperor Z smiled casually and looked at Lin Feng. Do you think you're too talented for the Li ministry? I'm just not used to it, said Lin Feng indifferently. He didn't want to stay in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry or become one of their disciples. Inside his spirit world, he had some cultivators from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry whom he was going to transform into demon puppets. I see. I won't force you then, but your deployment spells are incredible. Please show me how strong your deployment spells are for you to refuse the Li ministry's invitation, said Great Emperor Z, his smile now cold. He stepped forwards, deployment marks glittered all around him. The crowd hastily retreated. They didn't wait to see anything anymore, they all ran away. Only Lin Feng and Great Emperor Z remained. Those people knew how terrifyingly strong Great Emperor Z was. At that moment, the ground under Great Emperor Z grew dark and fissures appeared. It became scorching hot. No fire had appeared yet, but the temperature was increasing. Great Emperor Z is incredibly strong. Even though that guy's deployment spells are powerful, Great Emperor Z will teach him a good lesson. People murmured. Lin Feng moved away, marks appearing under his feet. They seemed to be made of earth strength and looked indestructible. Great Emperor Z grunted icily and stepped forwards again. Fire suddenly appearing and the air starting to burn. Lin Feng was surrounded by fire. What a powerful fire qi, thought Lin Feng. His opponent was strong, with powerful cosmic energies. He also understood Dao strength, or his social position couldn't have been that high within the Li ministry. The difference between great emperors who understood Dao strength and the others was gigantic. Lin Feng condensed cosmic energies around himself, marks filled the air. Demon and earth strength condensed and surrounded his body like his clothes. Great Emperor Z stretched out his hands, and his terrifying fire strength turned into 9 fire dragons, charging towards Lin Feng to devour him. Embers kept exploding and fiery lights appeared. Lin Feng jumped away and waved his hands. Lights glittered. Lin Feng released sword intent, fusing it together with his strength and turning it into gigantic swords. They shot towards the 9 dragons. Great Emperor Z just smiled icily and continued stepping forwards, the firestorm around him getting more and more ferocious as he kept forming hand seals. The fire blotted out the sky and swooped towards Lin Feng. It was like he had ended up in a volcano, a world with flames everywhere. Purple lights also appeared. They looked like spiritual beings within the flames. Lin Feng's armor shook. He drifted backwards, trying to leave the fire world deployment spell, but Great Emperor Z shouted furiously, his silhouette flickering as he turned into many illusions. A hand smashed towards Lin Feng's armored chest. People's hearts were twitching. Was Lin Feng going to die? Crackling sounds spread in the air. Lin Feng flew away. His armor was broken. Fire marks appeared on it, and finally they moved onto Lin Feng's skin. Lin Feng lowered his head. Everybody was staring at him. Could Lin Feng still move normally after that attack? Lin Feng raised his head and smiled at Great Emperor Z icily. Your Excellency, your Dao is the Dao of fire. Everybody frowned. This guy was extremely strong. After Great Emperor Z's attack, he could still act normally, as if nothing had happened. Great Emperor Z stared at him strangely. Then he smiled and said, "You're acting as if nothing had happened even though my attack was powerful. That's rare. Unfortunately, you don't want to join the Li ministry. I won't force you then." The deployment spells faded away as Great Emperor Z left. A short time later, Great Emperor Z landed on a mountain just before reaching the Li Ministry. There were some people around him, all looking at Lin Feng in the distance. That guy is an incredible genius. His deployment spells are truly impressive. If he wants to stay in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, but doesn't want to join the Li Ministry, it would be a pity. However, if he doesn't want to stay in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and doesn't join one of the 81 ministries, kill him, said Great Emperor Z calmly. The people around him frowned in astonishment. Chapter 21-23. Gone Ministry's Paradise. When Lin Feng saw Great Emperor Z leave, his silhouette also flickered as he left. After a short time, Lin Feng landed on a mountain and coughed up some scorching hot qi. His face was red. Great Emperor Z is a great emperor, and a scary one. He's not an ordinary cultivator, he understands Dao. His deployment spells are also terrifying, and so is his fire Dao. How formidable, thought Lin Feng. He sat down cross-legged and gradually got rid of the fire in his organs. That punch had been deadly, and its explosive fire strength had penetrated into his body. Luckily, his physical body was extremely powerful. Any other emperor at the top of the Huang Qi layer would have burned to death. After a short time, a silhouette flickered and landed next to Lin Feng. They said nothing though, simply gazing into the distance and calmly waiting there. Lin Feng rid himself of the fire strength in his body and looked at the man. He asked calmly, "What do you want?" "You refused Great Emperor Z's invitation?" The man turned around and asked calmly. "So what?" replied Lin Feng. "You don't know about Great Emperor Z's temper. He cares a lot about the Li Ministry. When he has enemies, he tries to get rid of them. You humiliated Xue Luo and Qian Mo, and you nearly killed Xie Mao with your deployment spell. If you had joined the Li Ministry, he would have taken care of you, but you refused. And if you don't become a disciple of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, Great Emperor Z will." "You mean that I must join the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry?" "No, I'm just telling you. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry doesn't force people to become disciples. They don't lack geniuses. However, you are extremely powerful. The Gone Ministry is one of the 9 supreme ministries. If you join us, Great Emperor Z will act as if nothing had happened," said that young man calmly. He had indeed come in peace. "Aren't you worried that I could obtain resources and then leave?" Lin Feng smiled. The other man smiled calmly. "That's your own business. I will think about it," Lin Feng offered. "I hope so," the other replied calmly. His silhouette flickered and he was gone. Lin Feng closed his eyes in thought. That man didn't seem to want to deceive him. Lin Feng had the sensation some people seemed to be watching him. "I wonder if Great Emperor Z has sent people to watch me. It seems that if I want to leave the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, it won't be easy," thought Lin Feng calmly. He started using the Celestial Evolution Holy Scriptures to modify deployment spells. Cosmic energies appeared. Wind and empty space cosmic energies fused together, and deployment marks appeared. This deployment spell looked special. It was a pair of wings. "I made wings using a deployment spell," thought Lin Feng. The wings had appeared on his back. He opened them up, and a strong wind started blowing furiously past him with a long howling. Empty space strength filled the air as Lin Feng kept modifying his wings. Deployment spells represented extensive knowledge and profound scholarship. Nothing was impossible, it was always possible to modify them. Before, Lin Feng had practiced the 3,000 great deployment spells and countless small deployment spells. Even though they were powerful, they lacked something: vigor and vitality. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's deployment spells were powerful and could be used like strength. As long as someone was persevering and talented, nothing was impossible. Lin Feng's ideas of deployment spells were fixed at the beginning. He had learned more about them thanks to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. He started modifying them as he wished, adapting them to his needs. They made him intrinsically stronger. Those who were watching Lin Feng had a strange feeling. He was extremely strong and talented, and had joined the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. But he wasn't in a hurry to join one of the 81 ministries. He wasn't even interested in the 9 supreme ministries. He had come purely for deployment spells, it seemed. Great Emperor Z's methods were cruel, but one had to admit what he was doing wasn't groundless. Since such a powerful deployment spellcaster had appeared, if they couldn't use him, then they had to eliminate him. It was cruel and straightforward, but that was the sad truth of the cultivation world. They were convinced that a few great emperors could easily kill Lin Feng. Of course, they also hoped that Lin Feng would be interested in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry and would join a supreme ministry. Any of them was acceptable. At that moment the sky distorted. People raised their heads and gazed into the distance. Clouds appeared, and a strong wind started blowing. Qi filled the air. All the disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, get ready to go into the Gone Ministry's paradise, proclaimed a loud voice, heard everywhere in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. They're going to open the Gone Ministry's paradise for everybody. What's going on? The Gone Ministry wants to open the Gone Ministry's paradise, and wants everyone to go in there? I guess they want to get ready for the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. Imagine, we are ordinary disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Even if we go to the Gone Ministry's paradise, and we're lucky, we'd never be able to participate. The geniuses will participate, not us. But some people will be lucky, and will go to Godly Cloud City, and participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. They'll make the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry famous. You're right. It's probably because of that, for those geniuses to get ready to go and participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. After that voice resonated everywhere in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, many people started talking as they headed towards the Gone Ministry's paradise. The Gone Ministry was the first of the 81 ministries. The Gone Ministry's paradise was an ancient paradise small world, created by the ancestors of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. It was said that it was a place where great deployment masters could practice cultivation. Even the Gone Ministry's disciples rarely had occasion to go there. Today, it was open to all, a rare opportunity, something that might happen only once every 100 years. Lin Feng, who had spent some time in his spirit's world, opened his eyes. He knew the ministry was calling them to the Gone Ministry's paradise. Since everyone from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry was told to go there, could he go or not? He wasn't a member of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, after all. When Lin Feng thought about that, his silhouette flickered, and he followed the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's disciples regardless. The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry had existed for so many years. It was like a university. There were millions of disciples here. Lin Feng was in the crowd. Nobody really cared about him in the ocean of people. The members of the 81 ministries could hardly all know one another. There was what seemed like an endless number of low-level emperors. There was no limit of strength to be recruited by the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. They cared about deployment spells, and those who could pass the 999 Doors Challenge could become disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Of course, apart from emperors, there were also many great emperors. All the ministries had disciples who were great emperors. In front of the crowd was a valley and a mountain peak. The peak was like a wall with a door inside. That was the Gone Ministry's paradise. At that moment, the door opened. Some empty space energy emerged and everybody heard a voice. You may enter the Gone Ministry's paradise. Everybody's silhouette flickered, and they moved towards the door. Lin Feng followed, but remained discreet. Many people were watching for him, but nobody noticed him as he crossed the door. When Lin Feng crossed the deployment door, he reappeared in another world, an ancient realm. A strong cultivator had created this small world. If there hadn't been a door, it would have been impossible to notice that there was a small world there. After entering the small world, Lin Feng saw people moving in different directions. He picked a random direction for himself, but heard the wind sigh behind him. He frowned as he turned around and saw some familiar faces. There was the young man who had warned him about Great Emperor Z. He looked quite ordinary. When people saw him, they ignored him, but Lin Feng could sense that he was quite extraordinary. He had invited Lin Feng to join the Gan ministry, which meant he was probably the first disciple of the Gan ministry. We were meant to meet. My name is Yang Xiao. How should I call you, Your Excellency? Asked that person with a friendly smile. We were meant to meet, thought Lin Feng, but he smiled back and said, Mu Feng. Brother Mu Feng, I know the Gan ministry's paradise. I've been here before. Would you like to travel with me? Yang Xiao asked Lin Feng. Lin Feng's heart twitched. People who could freely travel to the Gan ministry's paradise definitely had a special social status. This man could come to the Gan ministry's paradise as he wished, which meant he had an extraordinary social status within the Gan ministry. Lin Feng remained silent for a few seconds and then he heard Yang Xiao say, Many great emperors will come here. If you bump into them, things will get complicated for you. If you stay with me, nobody will cause you trouble. Chapter 21-25. Animal Guardian Spirits. Lin Feng had already sensed Emperor Wu Tianjian's sword's life and vitality. However, it had a sword soul, and a sword soul was made out of the cultivator's soul. How could a deployment spell have a soul if a cultivator didn't grant it with a thread of his own soul? Lin Feng didn't understand. Lin Feng destroyed the spider web, despite its strength. He walked towards the spider, however. The spider opened its mandibles, and lights filled the air around him again. The energies looked sharp and deadly. They could easily cut a cultivator apart. But at his cultivation level, blades couldn't even stab him anymore. Lin Feng's hand was sharp. It seemed able to cut anything. It moved forwards. The wind whistled as the lights were cut apart. Lin Feng landed on the spider's back, driving it down to the ground with a crunch. At the same time, Lin Feng's soul strength penetrated into the spider's third eye. As expected in the spider's brain, there was a thread of light, a spider soul. As expected, deployment beasts also have a soul. However, where does that soul come from? Is it really natural? Lin Feng doubted what the ancestor of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry had said. Of course, it was his own impression. There was no precise reason for thinking Yang Xiao was lying. There were many strong cultivators in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. Many people had also noticed this, but they didn't question what the ancestors said. After all, in the world of cultivation, there were many things which couldn't be explained. These deployment beasts which were alive were a perfect example. Lin Feng released qi into the air. In an instant it surrounded the spider, and the spider disappeared. Since it had a soul, it could probably be controlled. Lin Feng continued walking forwards. He encountered many deployment beasts. Some of them were very strong, and could also cast deployment spells, just like the spider. Those beasts' ability to cast deployment spells seemed to be innate. Lin Feng took all of them without exception. He put them all in his spirit world. He wanted to see if he'd be able to control them. Tomb. Lin Feng looked at the ground from the sky and saw a grave. There was even a gravestone. In front of it, there were deployment beasts protecting it. That's why it drew Lin Feng's attention. Cyan Dragon of the East, White Tiger of the West, Vermilion Bird of the South, Tortoise of the North, he murmured. That place was in the middle of the creatures. For guardian spirits protecting a gravestone, who was buried there. At this time, the four beasts were staring at some people ferociously. Those people were from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and had come to the small world to practice. They wanted to see what was on that gravestone. Finally, someone moved towards the gravestone. But the white tiger moved to intercept and glared at that person icily. It also released a formidable power. It looked just like a guardian spirit. We're disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. We came to pray for our ancestor. Let us pass, said that strong cultivator. However, the white tiger just looked at him icily. That strong cultivator grunted icily and stretched out his hands. There was a rumble of moving energy, and imprints shot towards the white tiger. The white tiger roared angrily and spat out golden lights. Explosions erupted as they met the imprints. And everything exploded. The strong cultivator grunted again, and struck out with punches at the white tiger. Energy filled the air. The one who had attacked the white tiger was a great emperor who controlled Tao power, as were the others with him. They were all extremely strong. The white tiger roared. More golden lights materialized. Everything became golden around him. He looked like a king. His golden lights shot in all directions. The earth and sky trembled. Those people's hearts started pounding. They were great scholars, but they couldn't cast deployment spells so quickly. However, that white tiger who was a guardian spirit with innate abilities and extremely strong. It's a great imperial deployment beast, thought the astonished Lin Feng. The white tiger was furious. The golden lights flared and turned into a curtain of light. The great emperor pulled a long face. He kept attacking, but the white tiger was still roaring furiously. Deployment lights filled the air around him, turning into a vortex and moving towards his enemy. How terrifying! The great emperor isn't as strong as the tiger, observed Lin Feng. The great emperor also thought of casting a deployment spell. But even as deployment lights started intertwining around him, the white tiger was too fast. He roared furiously and continuously. Deployment lights were everywhere. The other great emperors all withdrew, grimacing. They had heard about these powerful guardian spirits before. Everybody had told them to never offend them, but they had always had doubts. Now they could see them with their own eyes. Should we help him? Asked one of them, as their faces stiffened. That great emperor was stuck in a deployment cage now. Haven't you seen that the 3 other guardian spirits are eyeing us covetously? Answered one of them, watching the cyan dragon, the tortoise, and the vermilion bird carefully. The 3 guardian spirits were all extremely strong, watching the 3 as if they wanted to devour them. Help me! Shouted the great emperor desperately. To his despair, nobody was helping him. The deployment spell was getting more and more terrifying. The great emperor's hope was evaporating. Finally, the white tiger devoured him alive. The sight was quite fearsome, especially when the white tiger with blood dripping from his jaws raised his head and looked at them. Phew, Lin Feng took a deep breath. How strong! What would have happened if I had been the great emperor? For guardian spirits, Saint Imperial marks, inherited from the great deployment master. You dared try? Said Yang Xiao, looking at those people indifferently. Even though we're in the Gone Ministry's paradise, there are no rules saying we can't do certain things. If we're able to do something, does anything prevent us from doing so? Someone else replied to Yang Xiao. If they hadn't found the grave, never mind. But they did, and it was protected by terrifying guardian spirits. Few people could compete with them. The problem is, can you defeat them? Yang Xiao smiled coldly, which made those people pull long faces. Their friend had just been killed. It proved everything. Hee hee, Yang Xiao, no need to tell us those things. If you had had the opportunity, you would have done the same. Everybody knows what kind of person you are in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. Returned that person with a knowing smile. Everybody agreed. Even the 9 supreme ministries had told their direct disciples not to touch him. Haha, you understand me. Yang Xiao burst into laughter and said, You're right, if I have the opportunity, I'll kill the guardian spirits, and now I do have that opportunity. When they heard him they frowned. Yang Xiao, what do you mean? I can deal with them if you all help me, replied Yang Xiao. And then? Asked the crowd. They had always wanted to see what was hidden in that grave. Before, you must help me do something, said Yang Xiao. What? Asked the cultivators, frowning. That guy was shameless. Help me capture that guy, said Yang Xiao, pointing at Lin Feng. Everybody looked at Lin Feng, not understanding. Wasting so much energy to capture an emperor? And he needed help for that. Lin Feng frowned and his eyes twinkled icily. Yang Xiao was definitely treacherous. He wanted to capture Lin Feng now. Yang Xiao, there are no tensions between you and me, and you even invited me to join the Gone Ministry. Is that how you treat your friends? Replied Lin Feng icily, staring at Yang Xiao. He opened his hand and deployment marks appeared. Your Excellency, I think you won't accept my invitation, so I'll capture you first, and then we can talk. Yang Xiao smiled. Lin Feng suddenly turned into a beam of light and shot off into the distance. Die! Shouted Great Emperor Zi icily. He released Fire Dao power, which struck Lin Feng and penetrated into his body. Lin Feng was furious when he sensed the qi latch hold of him. If you want to go into the grave, capture him, shouted Yang Xiao explosively as he started chasing Lin Feng. The crowd frowned. Their silhouettes flickered. They all chased after Lin Feng like madmen. Since Yang Xiao had told them to, they obeyed. He might even keep his promise. Lin Feng released empty space and wind cosmic energies and modified them. At the same time, his spirit world qi filled the air and gigantic wings appeared on his back. He beat them and streaked across the sky. He was moving at an incredible speed. How fast? Yang Xiao remains vigilant. He joined hands with me, but surprisingly he asked some great emperors to help him. He hadn't thought this guy would be so fast, thought Great Emperor Z when he saw that. However, deployment marks appeared under his feet, and he started moving through empty spaces. Chapter 21-26. Killing God. Yang Xiao was extremely fast. Deployment lights appeared under his feet, and he started moving. He caught up with Great Emperor Z, and they continued chasing Lin Feng. When Great Emperor Z heard the whistling sounds next to him, he fumed. People from the Gan ministry are good to Yang Xiao. They know he always resorts to evil methods, so they gave him a precious treasure to escape. Yang Xiao was one of the 2 emperors who had the highest social status in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. His social status was higher than Yi Kei's or Xie Mao's. Of course, he was stronger than them too. He had an extensive knowledge and profound scholarship. He wasn't greedy, quite even-tempered, and he also remained discreet most of the time. He obtained things all the time from all the ministries because he was talented. He could steal people's memories and use them for himself. When he took someone's memories, the victim became amnesic and stupid. In the past, there had been many cases in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Some extremely strong people had lost memories. Yang Xiao didn't care about weak people's memories. At the beginning, nobody knew who had done it. Eventually people had found out that it was Yang Xiao, but the Gan ministry protected him. They had given him a treasure which protected his life, so nobody could do anything to him. However, similar things continued happening, and the supreme ministries were infuriated and wanted to punish him. They even threatened to kill him if he touched their disciples' memories. Yang Xiao had finally stopped hunting the disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. When Yang Xiao saw Lin Feng, he had immediately thought of him as a prey. He wanted to steal Lin Feng's memories. It was a terrifying skill, especially since Lin Feng was extremely strong. Stealing such people's memories had made Yang Xiao extremely strong. Because of his special power, it was difficult for people of the same cultivation level to resist him. Even though he wasn't very talented, only one person who had an innate spiritual deployment-type body could compete with him. That person's power was similar to the legendary cultivator's power, who had created the deployment mines with deployment spiritual beings. It was an innate power. It was difficult to find such people in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and his deployment spells were awesome. That person was the first emperor of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Many great emperors were weaker than him. Lin Feng's speed was terrifying. However, Yang Xiao was catching up with him. Red lights shot towards Lin Feng. He frowned and turned around suddenly. World of the Living Imprints flashed towards Yang Xiao. It was like heaven and earth were surrounding him. Yang Xiao had nowhere to escape. Yang Xiao released deployment lights around himself and disappeared. He reappeared above Lin Feng. Lin Feng's eyes became pitch black and deathly cold. His death intent was intense. Holy spirits filled with cursing strength moved towards Yang Xiao, pulsing with power. At the same time, Lin Feng shouted furiously. Sound waves and cursing strength invaded Yang Xiao's mind. At the same time, Lin Feng raised his hands and blocked the red lights. Lin Feng released explosive deployment marks and appeared in front of Yang Xiao. Terrifying cosmic energies emitted furious whistling sounds and oppressed Yang Xiao. Sword lights streaked across the sky, and a dazzling sword trail appeared, able to cut and destroy anything. Block! Yang Xiao suddenly turned into a void. A strong wind started blowing, and energies rolled out around him. He disappeared and reappeared in front of Lin Feng again. Terrifying lights emerged from his third eye and shot towards Lin Feng's brain, accompanied by a dangerous qi. Lin Feng felt his thoughts start to unsettle. He suddenly had a headache, and the impression his brain was going to explode. His soul also started to shake chaotically. Die. Death's strength moved towards his enemy's brain. Both of them had terrifying attacks, and both controlled deployment spells. Their attacks were cruel and brutal. Anyone else could have been easily killed by their attacks. A terrifying strength moved towards Lin Feng. He raised his hands to block, and Yang Xiao had the impression a mountain had fallen onto his back. He could barely breathe, and felt he was going to explode. Deployment lights emerged from his body, and he retreated. He was thinking that he was right. Lin Feng was indeed extremely talented, a real genius. In the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, there weren't many people like him. He might be as strong as the one who had a spiritual deployment body. Yang Xiao wanted to steal his memories even more. Great Emperor Z and the others finally caught up with them. Great Emperor Z stretched his hands, and a terrifying fire surrounded Lin Feng. It felt like his entire body was going to burn. Stop! Behind him, deployment lights started intertwining. A cage appeared and imprisoned him. Everybody smiled coldly. He wanted to escape from them, but it wasn't that easy. However, they saw Lin Feng jump up. He raised his shining fist, smashed the cage, and blew it apart instantly. Then he took out a deployment talisman, and he disappeared, reappearing far in the distance. What kind of materials did he use to carve such a deployment talisman? He can surprisingly teleport so far. Yang Xiao and the others were astonished and all pulled long faces. Surprisingly, he had escaped. Chase him! Shouted Yang Xiao icily. He was extremely fast. Deployment lights surrounded him again. He disappeared once more. Lin Feng's speed was terrifying. He used deployment talismans, knowing he wasn't strong enough to deal with so many great emperors. Yang Xiao had asked them to chase him, not the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, but the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry couldn't say anything to protect him. Lin Feng had come to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry willing to take risks. Now it was even worse. He was in the Gone Ministry's paradise. He had anticipated he would run into danger. He just hadn't thought it would happen so fast. Lin Feng realized that he couldn't escape from Yang Xiao. Yang Xiao shouted extremely loudly, "Help me stop that guy. I'll be infinitely grateful." Many people heard him clearly far away in the distance and rushed over. Lin Feng saw someone rush over to him. He welcomed the man with a sword attack. The sword lights were dazzling and hurt that guy's eyes as it turned into a gigantic beam of light. Lin Feng then used another deployment talisman and disappeared. However, some people were still blocking him. A strong cultivator released ancient imprints onwards him. At the same time, Dao power moved into his body. He grunted with pain, infuriated. "Anyone who tries to stop me will die," shouted Lin Feng explosively, the earth and sky trembling. 9 dragons roared. At the same time, a violent qi exploded out from him. It was a weapon king qi, terrifying and indestructible. Lin Feng seemed to be able to conquer every obstacle. He flapped his gigantic deployment wings unceasingly and streaked across the sky. Someone was staring at him as he tried to block Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked back at him icily. He used his Nihility Sword Scriptures attack and released an empty space death sword, simultaneously releasing other sword energies. His enemy didn't have time to be stupefied. He instantly disappeared, dead and gone. Ordinary emperors of the top of the Huang Qi layer couldn't withstand a single attack from him. Lin Feng didn't stop moving. Someone in front of him released ice-cold lights. His death strength turned into a long river. At the same time, millions of black death swords appeared. His world of the living imprints blotted out the sky. Lin Feng's enemy had the impression he was going to drown. He tried to escape from Lin Feng, but those death energies absorbed him completely. When the crowd in the distance saw that, they were astonished. In the blink of an eye, Lin Feng had already killed 5 or 6 people. Everyone who had tried to stop him. "How insolent!" swore a great emperor, darting forwards and releasing his qi. He threw himself at Lin Feng, condensing endless strength. The terrifying qi blotted out the sky. In Lin Feng's eyes there was only coldness and death. People chased him to kill him? Then he had to kill them. If his soul and physical body hadn't been strong enough, he would have been dead long ago. Die! Lin Feng looked like a death god. Nothing could distract him. He threw himself at the qi which the great emperor was condensing, and released qi himself. He looked like a sharp sword. "Stay here!" shouted the great emperor. Stepping forwards, the ground was shaking. A strong wind was blowing, strong enough to kill people. However, when he released that explosive qi, Lin Feng disappeared and released his shadow spirit. His whole body turned into a blurry shadow, and he moved even faster. The wind was still moaning. Something moved through it with a whistle of doom. The terrifying qi made the earth and sky tremble. The great emperor stopped running forwards, his face stiffening. Yang Xiao streaked across the sky, a hurricane appearing around him. He frowned because he saw the great emperor turn into blood and ashes suddenly. Yang Xiao's heart started pounding, but he wanted Lin Feng's memories even more. The more dangerous Lin Feng was, the more interesting he was. He wanted to obtain Lin Feng's powers. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.